discuss that off air later.
We're not on yet. We've got 3 minutes.
Yeah, totally.
We spoiled anybody else's Christmas. Right?
That's hilarious. Oh, there he is. Okay, we're good to go.
Came here.
Right?
You're on.
Sure. All right. I'll call to order the study session for May 14th, 2019. We'll start with our fiscal year 2020 master fee schedule, and it will be introduced at great length by Bonnie Dennis.
Good evening, everybody. So I'm going to present the fiscal year 2020 master fee schedule. In order to facilitate the conversation, I've invited the other folks that are in charge of their respective sections of the fee schedule. So if you have any questions, we'll go ahead and pull them up. I'm going to be working off the red line version of the fee schedule as I present to you all tonight. And so I'm also going to start with planning because I know Denny has to get to the planning commission. So, and then I was going to go into the regular order. So if we could skip over to section 10 of the fee schedule, which is page 67, I think, on your side.
67?
Yeah. I should have warned Denny before I started.
So it's not 67 in the pocket, it's 67 in the, got it. Perfect.
So, so there's several fees that have changed in the planning section. Some of them went up, some of them went down. And I was gonna actually ask Danny to go over those a little bit more in detail.
Sure. On the first page, if everybody's there, okay. Page SS 67. Thank you.
I need the login for here.
Okay.
Maybe,
wanna just share with me?
Maybe it might let me just do that.
Well, if you want to move stuff, I can put
No,
mine in
that's
between.
okay, I got it, yeah.
Okay, great.
This is what I wanted.
Yeah, and now I just have to find my documents again.
Well, I can probably start describing this as you look for it, I think.
Yeah, good, I'm good.
The major change on this page was related to what we charge for plan development. When a plan development comes in, there are 2 steps. A planning commission review of the concept plan, and then that's for the preliminary plan approval. And then a final plan approval that is similar to a zone change. It requires applying the plan development symbol, PD, to the zoning map that would then deliver the master plan zoning to that site where there might be some variations to the code requirements. In addition to that, there might be separate applications for a zone change to affect density or a subdivision approval that would be also separate. So in essence, there's a fee for the concept plan, applying the plan development symbol to the map, a zone change if necessary, and a subdivision if necessary. So as we look back at the code requirements, we're not really certain how these fees were established originally, but they seem like they were priced at a level where it was assumed that all of those things were incorporated into the base plan development fee. So we were proposing to just change the preliminary plan review to a normal type 3 approval and the final plan review to a normal type 4 approval fee. So those match the fees that you would see up above in the standard land use applications. So they're lower, but in fact, a plan development application is probably the most expensive application that we have because of this series of fees. And we're expecting a plan development application in the near future for the Hillside master plan. So that was what brought our attention to this. There are just some clarifying points that we wanted to bring up in the footnotes. Number 7 clarifies that a subdivision fee is in addition to the plan development fee, and just a few others. And then the tree removal that you would see under natural resource, that is just for natural resource tree removal. If we come up with another tree removal fee in the future for others, this is when we're talking about tree removals in natural resource areas, not somewhere else. So that's
Not in right-of-ways.
correct.
Oh, okay.
So it was, most of those footnotes are intended to clarify what might be confusing. And I have to admit, this is the first time I've really kind of spent time, well, you guys have looked at this every year since I've worked here. This is the first time I've kind of taken a more critical look at a lot of the line items in here. There's, going on to the next set of changes, on page SS 69, this was a mess. We didn't understand what was going on under the additional application fees, and working with the engineering staff determined that this technical report review is actually the fee for the impact studies that are done for transportation. So we ended up, so that's a 2-step process as well. There's a scope of work that's required, so there's a $1,500 fee for that. And then there's the review of the technical report, which for us involves contracting with an outside transportation consultant to do that review. So we have a $2,500 deposit that goes down, that's submitted for that. So 2 steps, those are just trying to clarify what they're for, what the fees are. And we do something similar for natural resources technical review, where we get a $3,000 deposit for that. And then other reserve deposits for technical assistance could be, for example, if we wanted to consult with a architect regarding a historic review or something on that order, we might also ask for money. We did a couple of, in the next section down, discounts for land use applications. We just tried to clean up a couple of wording issues there. And then the final thing I guess I want to point out is in SS 71, page SS 71. We periodically have the design review, Design and Landmarks Committee review applications downtown and provide advice. Well, we've done that in the past at no cost, and we're just not sure that that is something that we really want to charge for. That's not part of the official review. That's a pre-design comment, and it seemed like $800 in some instances may discourage people from going through it. It also it wasn't something we had done in the past. Felt like it's a nice service to be able to provide this additional guidance as we go into the review process.
So we don't require downtown developments to
We
go
do.
through the DLC?
This is the advice part, before a submittal.
Oh,
So
like a pre-app.
it was like a pre-app. They do have to pay for a review fee when they're going through the full process. So those were the big changes in planning. And
So where is the tree removal fee for trees in the right of way?
I am not sure what it is.
It's in the engineering.
It's in the engineering chapter? Okay.
Yeah,
I mean, I was gonna say, I paid one years
Yeah.
ago. I mean, I know there must be one.
There is one.
okay. Unless you guys have other stuff, I'll go sit in the back.
Well, it just sort of brings up an organizational question.
Sure.
As somebody thinking about taking down a tree, they're probably not going to go, let's see, this tree is in the right of way, because half of them don't know that that front part of their yard is actually the right of way, right? Or this tree is next to a creek. It might make sense for all things tree related to be in a
In one place.
place where you just go trees, and then you go find the thing about trees. And it will then describe the difference, rather than hunting all over the different. And, you know, the normal person is gonna come across whatever the first one they come across is, trees, and they'll go, oh, okay. But they won't necessarily be right, and unless all of our fees were exactly the same, which they're not.
A simple change may be just a cross-reference with some footnotes, but I think you're right.
Yeah, and I think that the first place people are going to go is to the website. The website's going to be where people go when they're first looking at tree issues. We do have the urban forestry page, and we can make it clearer on that page. So Peter and I can work on that.
I like the cross-reference idea though too, because I still find our website is not very searchable. I still
Absolutely.
Google our own website, so just.
Well, and it might be, I mean, just doing cross-references for this year, and I mean, we're expecting new code from the tree board at some point, so at the point where we have major revisions, then it would make sense to pull it out as its own chapter or whatever.
So with this fee schedule, I could do cross-referencing throughout. There's gonna be other ones besides trees, I'm sure. So I can take a look at that before I bring it forward next time.
Yeah, just when people, people don't know how we think about things, and so they're gonna be coming at it from their perspective, which is,
That makes sense. Okay. Any questions for planning before I let Jenny go?
Okay, wow. I thought I was gonna be here a while.
You're good.
Are you disappointed?
We could make you go last.
Yeah, well, at the last minute, I said, Scott, can I still get some food? So now I'm feeling really fortunate. Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so I'm gonna start back in the beginning, so starting at number 1, administration, which is page 46.
page which?
46.
46?
Yeah. So there's no changes here. I just wanted to point out what we've done in the past is that the billable hourly rates, we had a schedule in here previously. We've removed it last year. It just kind of cleans it up. It's been very effective for us in the last year, so we're going to keep it the same. But the calculated rate, 2.5 times at step 4, the employee's job classification is going to remain. But I wanted to see if there's any comments on that.
How often do we use this?
Quite often.
Quite often.
Public records request is the one that comes to mind. Yeah. Okay. Moving on to section 2, building. Throughout the building department, or the building fees, everything was increased by the CPIU, the Oregon Consumer Price Index, and that was 2.4%. These have already been approved by the state. So Sam is here if you have any questions on building. Pretty much every fee got increased, so it's all the same rate. There's nothing new added, there's no additional changes, just that it increased by 2.4%. Moving along, business registration on page 55, which is section 3. So this fee gets increased every year. I increased it by the CPI-U rate, which brought it to $136 for the standard base fee, and then $10 for each full-time employee. And then the new business prorated rate is just half of the full-time standard base fee.
So what would be, so when we say temporary business, I mean, does that include like real estate brokers who put a sign up in front of the house? Or is it somebody who opens up a storefront on Main Street or one of the site, whatever, you know?
Yeah,
How do we define that?
It's usually if somebody's coming into town and having a small storefront for a couple weeks, or they're coming into town to do services for another company, they can get the 2 weeks. So, yeah.
How are things like food trucks at the farmer's market? Are those temporary?
Yeah, they all need a business registration as well.
Yeah.
But they are not, those are not temporary, they're
Okay.
permanent.
Okay.
They're annual renewals, yeah.
At the farmer's market?
No, not the farmer's market, I was thinking
The food cart pod?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Right, but the
Yeah.
farmer's market.
Yeah, the farmer's market, actually, they have, they don't actually need the business registration because they're considered, like peddler. They're only there for temporary purposes, but based on the, agreement that we have with the organization is they don't have to get a business registration because it's hard to maintain those it's like the First Fridays.
Same thing.
It's vendors coming in for a one-time event, so we don't require the business registration with them.
So same for like a food cart that shows up at like the summer concerts or a school event or something like that, we're not.
Yeah.
Well, that's, not that I want us to start charging the food cards, but just sort of work that through in my own brain. Construction companies are gonna come in and gonna build
Yeah.
one house or even just remodel one bathroom, have to get
They need to get a business
a
registration.
business license, and that's pretty temporary too.
Yeah.
I mean, how are we,
Yeah.
what's our sort of dividing line? And how
Yeah, the code is very tricky in that way. There is actually a lot of cleanup that needs to happen in the code. So off the top of my head, I'd have to really look at the differences between that. But a small contractor coming into the city to do a small job is likely not going to get a business registration.
But theoretically, they're supposed to, right?
Theoretically, they're supposed to.
That is interesting, because you think about that type of thing the one time. I mean, like when I had my bathroom was remodeled, I know they bought a license, to do that. But a food truck that comes in, I mean, every first Friday or every week at farmer's market or something, although I can see why they wouldn't, but it could raise questions at some point in time. That's why I wondered, so what does it mean, temporary business? If a real estate agent puts a sign up in a yard and is selling a house, is that a temporary business? Or are they covered under something else? Or do we,
Yeah, that's a good question. I haven't seen that come across very often, and it's probably because they're doing other transactions in the city. So
Yeah.
the business, the realtor firm is probably licensed, but, one time, yeah,
Yeah.
so.
Well,
Yeah.
I
I'd have to
guess-
do a little bit more research to
Yeah.
answer that.
Well, and I think it would be onerous to try to capture all of those kinds
Yeah,
of things.
sure.
I'm not suggesting that we do that.
No,
It's just,
no,
I want to clarify in my brain just what that means, yeah.
How we're dicing that, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, I guess I can see a distinction for construction-related businesses because we do the inspection on the construction, right?
That's the point, yeah.
Versus food vendors, we don't do the food
Right.
inspection. That's,
The health department
the food
does that,
licensing is
yeah.
not the city's purview.
Right.
So I
Yeah.
could see
Good point.
just a reason for drawing a distinction
Mm-hmm.
there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm good with it all. I just, a question flitted through my brain.
It is something that's, one of my goals over the next couple of years when we can, is to look at the code more directly and to kind of clarify those things, because it is, there are so many moving parts to business registration.
Thank you.
Okay, so next section is parking. The,
Everybody's favorite
That'd
subject.
be on page 56. So downtown parking, based on city council's direction several years ago, was to increase the fees by $10 a year for the monthly permits and then the corresponding quarterly, up until the point where the monthly permit is $100 a month. So this is now, we've increased it to $70. The quarterly is going to be $200. The other fees remain the same. The daily permit is $5. It matches what TriMet is paying, what TriMet passes are currently. So that didn't change. The downtown parklet use fees did not change.
So I just wanted to have a really quick discussion before we move on. Because I didn't go back and listen to our last meeting on this or the 2 meetings before that. But I just want to make sure that we're, I think that, my comments were not until it's the same as TriMet. My comments were at least as much, if not more, because we should be incentivizing transit, not incentivizing parking. And so I think, $10 initially was a good incremental increase. I don't know that it should always be $10 every year because we may never catch up. I think the goal should be, this is a policy statement that the city is making. And so I don't think the goal should be, we should be as cheap as TriMet. I think the goal should be, we should try to get more people making better choices when they can. And so I just wanted to clarify, at least that was my own thinking when I was making those comments last time. I think that was that was my understanding of the thinking, the council before I came on board, when that council was having this conversation. So I'm glad to see that, that the daily permit is not less than a transit pass. I don't think that it should remain the same as a transit pass. And maybe we should be considering at this point, percentage increases and not simple dollar increases, so that eventually we are incentivizing transit and not incentivizing parking.
What's the monthly pass up to?
A monthly, it's not, I guess you can probably still get a monthly pass, but it works out to be you can't spend, if you have a hop card, you're not gonna spend more than $100 in a month.
That's what I was,
So that's a short answer to that question.
So roughly $100 a month?
it is.
And how many day passes do we set? How does one even buy a day pass? They come to the desk at City Hall?
Yeah, they just come to the desk.
Yeah.
Usually it's the businesses that are coming and saying, we're gonna have a consultant here coming for the day, can I send them down?
Yeah.
They buy a day pass. So as far as how many we've gotten, we don't get many, that's for sure.
It is. Park all day.
It's less than 10 a year.
Less than 10 daily
Yeah,
a year?
yeah, it's not many. Yeah, we get 13 sorry, we get, most of our purchases are quarterly, so about 92 passes in a given quarter. Yeah, in a quarter, and then about 13 purchase the monthly. So,
Well, I mean, I think I'm good with staying with the $10 a year that we've discussed, but it does seem to me that this daily pass then becomes cheaper than just coming in. I mean, if you're here, 20 days, well, not 20, but if you're here, say 3 weeks out of the month, then it's cheaper to come get a daily pass
Right.
every day, and that also becomes a workload thing. So maybe we should be raising the daily a little bit. I mean, even though it doesn't seem very many people are using it, but we don't want it to be an incentive to.
Right.
we do
To make
limit
more work.
customers, though, that you can't have more than 3 days.
Oh, okay.
Usually it's, and it hasn't seemed to be a problem,
Okay,
yeah, so, because they can't buy just dailies and not buy it
indefinitely.
monthly.
Yeah,
Right.
okay,
Okay.
okay.
Yeah.
Well, so I was just thinking about the $10, each year, it was a 20% increase. Now it's only like a 16% increase, and next year, if it's another 10, it's gonna be even less of an increase. And I just think that that's, not necessarily the trajectory that at least I was contemplating. I mean, it's gonna take how many years to get to the point where we're matching a transit pass. And 4 more years before we're equal to a transit pass, and then that will have gone up too, so.
Oh, true.
Have we ever, just to look at it from the other angle, we have rough ideas of what it costs to build surface parking, and rough ideas what it costs to build structured parking. Has anybody ever done the calculation on what we spend per parking space to maintain surface parking?
The surface parking we have now,
Yeah.
well, we don't do much to maintain it.
my-
We
I guess so.
repave Main Street, I mean, that's
I mean, we
maintaining
can
the surface.
certainly, we have information on how often we go out and refresh the pavement markings and sweep the streets and those pieces, but the actual paving piece, we'd have to just look at the last time we did a project
And divide it out.
and divide it out by how many years.
And what
Is it
square footage
common?
was parking versus
Right.
drive lanes and all of
Yeah.
that. I mean, it
And-
would be
Does maintenance are we talking about strictly physical maintenance, or are we also talking about the administration of the programs and monitoring, patrolling?
Every
Well, the patrolling
Signing.
pays for itself. That was,
Yeah, because of the fines.
Supposed to. Is it?
no, it does. Our parking enforcement officer is paid through the fines, yeah, that we collect. And I also believe a portion of the judge's income, no, the judge isn't, it's just John. Okay.
No, but the administrative fees, so every year I do an analysis over the program itself. So I see where not just John's salary and his benefits get accounted for, but also the administrative fees for the front office staff that has to maintain the parking permits system and the transactions. But I also account for the cost for the UPS system, which is the parking system. I include things like credit card fees for those that are paying by credit card. So I can give you kind of a rough overview of how much we've net income, basically. So in fiscal year 18, we made $68,000 out of the program, which is a gross margin of 61%. This year, we're projected to more along the lines of 56%, or 86,000 gross profit, and that's mainly because we're increasing John's time out there into the parking citations, and the revenue increases because of that. So, along with the expenses as well for his
him
extra.
being full-time, yeah.
Yeah, his full-time, so.
Well, I suspect we're gonna be having more parking discussions later this year when we start talking about the Main and Harrison site. And, you know, when we see what plays out in South Downtown in terms of how much parking we have and all of that. So I guess I'm not inclined to revisit. I think the $10 a year is fair. And, you know, let's have that discussion when we have that, when we talk about parking more generally.
There will be several conversations about parking over the next couple of years,
Yeah.
just because of the plan that you adopted. So we'll be back.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with conceptually. I think as we start to move into the plan more and that rounds out, that's going to be an opportunity to think about how we charge. And at some point, we're probably going to end up putting meters or something like that.
We have a plan. I don't remember what all the stages of that plan are. We have had discussions about changes in signage, but it requires us to start looking at our off-street parking inventory as well. We have some staffing shifts, as you all know. That's going to slow us down a little bit while we go through that process, but we'll be talking about it this year.
Okay. So, moving on.
I'm not hearing any other.
The next section is engineering. So if you go to page 57, a lot of, within the engineering section is a lot of clarity and cleanup from prior years. The main thing that's really changed is that there was some fees that were removed or they were shifted. Kelly's here if there's more specific questions. So.
Come up with really hard questions. She was expecting. Kelly was really hoping there was going to be some hard questions.
So, Kelly Brooks, Assistant City Manager, and I'm joined by Dalton Bowden, who's on our engineering team. And so I wanted you guys to have a chance to meet him. He's kind of the first point of contact that most folks have when they're coming in with development review and kind of engineering requests. So he is here to make sure I don't say the wrong thing and jump in when I need some help explaining. But what you're looking at when you look at all the track changes is we did have a lot of fresh eyes that looked at the engineering section this year, which I think was really great. And our goal was, if it didn't really make sense to us, we wanted to write it in a way that did make sense. And so that's what you see here. Most of it's formatting. There are some things we hadn't included. On page 12 of the fee, there's a recording fee under the encroachment permits under right-of-way that we just weren't capturing. That's a cost that we were covering with the county and couldn't really recoup unless we included it. I think the most significant portions for you all to really take a look at are related to the fee in lieu of construction changes. So that's, is that study session 62 page is my track changes. It's page 17 of the master fee schedule document itself. What we did there is you'll look at the changes under transportation. We had, last year, we had an adopted fee of $4.46 per lineal foot for local streets, and $5.03 for collectors and arterials, and $1,079 for PARs. And as we were working with folks on their projects, this was becoming a stumbling block. I think I talked about it quickly at one of the housing conversations. It was so far outside what it would cost anyone to construct, and we were running into proportionality issues. And so what we did is we actually went and looked at the formula that had led to that number, realized that what we were asking for or calculating was a lot more than we actually would have been requesting in frontage improvements, so we made that revision. We're still asking for the 50% above, and we went ahead and calculated it out for local, whereas you'll see for collectors and arterials and PARs, we're saying cost plus 50%, and I want to explain the rationale for that. We're finding that we spend a lot of time on these local streets, on the one-off improvements on the smaller streets, and so we wanted to go ahead and get to a number there. Honestly, because we spend so much time and effort kind of coming to that number. We didn't want to have to do a full-on cost estimate for for a development on a local street. So we wanted to go ahead and get to a number. We believe that on collectors and arterials, we have more time to really do a cost estimate and do that 50% above and beyond that. We had gone in this direction. I believe it's Chuck's recommendation to make it higher in your input. It's what Portland does. It's what you do when you really want to incentivize people to build it themselves. You make the fee lock high. And we still want it to be higher. We still want to be able to capture that if this project happens in an out year, that we'll have resources to be able to do it. But it just really wasn't meshing well with our SAFE program. So we have areas where, to be frank, I don't have a capital improvement coming in. You'd be building a remnant stretch of improvements. We just had one the other day that's sort of near Lake Road. The real interest of the city is if you could do a fee lock and invest, and then we could actually construct sidewalk in the same area, but on a street that has a higher need. And so we have proposed shifting to this. And Dalton, you can jump in at any time, but when we worked through it, and as we've been working with folks, we feel like this helps us get to good improvements in a more kind of reasonable way with a lot of people that we're working with. But I know y'all talked about it a lot in the past, so I figured it would be one you might want to weigh in on.
So just to make sure, so are we,
We're cutting it in half for the
right,
local
I see
street. Yeah.
that, but I'm just curious about, when you were doing the calculation, so we were thinking 293 is the actual of what it would cost, so it's, okay.
Yeah, and so then we're adding 50%. No, we did 293. So no, 293 is actual plus 50%.
Oh, okay.
It is.
Yeah.
So it's still higher than actual?
Yeah.
So we're still not
Yeah,
really.
it still includes that 50%.
So
See, I will tell you from my
Yeah.
experience, it's not higher than actual.
Okay.
So I built a sidewalk, a swale, a curb, about 70 feet worth,
Okay.
and it cost me, I've just done the math on what 293 times 70 feet is, and that's about half of what it cost me to build it. I mean, to engineer it and build it. So the building and the planting the swale and all of that probably cost me 50% more than what this is.
Okay.
And then I paid another, almost what this is in engineering fees to engineer it. So,
in your personal experience, this is low.
yes.
Well, so I have a question about
Yeah.
that, though. Is this just, because 293 is one number, and there's going to be clearly different kinds of projects. There's going to be projects where all there is a sidewalk,
Right.
right? And then there's going to be projects where you have a storm swale, which is a completely different ball of wax, and it's going to require engineering and all those things.
The storm, this number includes sidewalk, storm, it includes all of that, right? If I'm recalling. The spread, I can pull up the spreadsheet in front of me, but it includes those elements. And then we added the 50% on top of that. So I'm not quite sure where we're off in terms of what you constructed and what's in our spreadsheet, but we can dig into it.
I mean,
we do-
I would certainly
Yeah.
Understand that a big development that's, building a lot of units
Yeah.
can get it done for cheap,
Right.
for this rate. But a one-off home doing it, I think
What's your
it's low.
frontage? What's the length of your?
You said
Pardon?
70 feet,
I
right?
think it's about 70 feet. Yeah.
Do you have anything you want to add in terms of where the discrepancy might be between what Lisa experienced and what our math showed?
What we get prior to the construction of these improvements is we get a performance bond. And so involved in that performance bond is a construction estimate, so that in case, the contractor quits partway through, there's still money that can finish it if need be. And so that's where, I didn't personally set up this spreadsheet, but that's kind of where the numbers came from, were from construction estimates that we had of recent improvements. The issue comes into when you've got a situation where someone needs to construct partial improvements. So you've got an existing large single-family home. This happened a couple times, and they want to make it into a duplex. And so they don't want to add any more square footage. So that adds a dwelling unit per our code, which triggers frontage improvements. And so now we're looking at a large section that they need to have full improvements because they're adding a dwelling unit, but we're also looking at direct proportionality for their impact onto the transportation system. And so 2 duplex units don't create the same number of new trips as 2 detached single-family homes would. And so they're not actually doubling their impact on the transportation system. It's something in between there. And so now, typically if you're building a new detached single-family home, full frontage improvements. And so you build that. But if now you've got this turning into a duplex situation that's isolated, we can't ask for a full sidewalk. And so now we're getting, 20 feet of sidewalk in front of a partial home. But then if we charge them this previous number before, it would be cheaper for them to build that 20 section of sidewalk, but not really mitigate their transportation as much as if we could have spent that money completing a safe project or adding a little bit more connection to an adjacent route towards a park that they still would have benefited from. That property is still receiving sidewalk, but on a busier street as opposed to their more local street. And so we were in a situation where it was cheaper for them to build that 20 feet of sidewalk than for us to ask them for this money, even though this money would be more beneficial for everyone. And so I think that's kind of where we're concerned about hitting a right number, where we want to encourage people to build sidewalks where it makes sense, and where it doesn't, that we're able to incorporate that into other projects to get the whole neighborhood closer to parks and transit routes.
Well, so, I mean, I think there are 2 different issues mixed up in there. There's the fee, what's the right fee? And then there's the, when can you pay a fee instead of building? And so that's an ordinance, actually. And so we have an ordinance that says, like, if we're building a safe fee, if there's a safe project, if there's a project coming to your street, you don't have to build, you can pay a fee. But it doesn't say everybody who just wants to can pay a fee, right?
Correct. The option to pay the fee is if there is a safety concern, if there's an upcoming project. There's a couple of other items there that leaves it up to the engineering director to see if any of those are satisfied before the fee can be applied.
Can I add one thing on that? Because I would say, one thing I would caution you on is basing the estimate off the construction bond or the performance bond, because there's an incentive for the developer or contractor to keep his performance bond as low as possible, because there's costs associated with that, getting that performance bond.
And we can go back and look at the numbers that fed into the spreadsheet before we finalize and give you more information before we bring it back to the next. I would say I'm not entirely, I think we're open to kind of talking through what the right amount is here. I will say that the amount that it was before made it a prohibitive tool to use. It in instances where we were trying to figure out a path forward, it wasn't working because it was so high. But to Peter's point, if you want us to do some more investigation into the numbers that fed into the 293 and provide that to you, we can. And you're exactly, Councilor Beatty, you're right. There's a policy decision in here about when you can and should activate this as an option. And maybe that's more where we need to spend some time. I think my refrain in terms of the engineering section is we put some stopgap measures in here in response to feeling like we're not wanting to be an inhibiting factor into some of the infill development that we know we want to move towards, knowing that more perfect solutions are kind of on the horizon as these conversations play out. And this one in particular, with ADUs in particular, has been causing challenges. So that's why it's here as sort of a stop, almost like a Band-Aid, to help us to move ahead. But if you have more concerns or want more information, that's why we're here, is to give you that. So.
Well, I think as long as we're all cognizant that this is not really what it costs, that may be the policy decision we want to make it easier. But it's not what it costs. And my project, it was exactly what you described. It was a duplex. I reclassified my home as a duplex, allow for a basement apartment. And that was 5 years ago. That was construction costs before the recent escalations we've seen. So I don't think this, yeah.
maybe that's a good option too, is if you don't mind sharing. If we can look at your numbers and we can look at our numbers and where we pulled them from, it's a good ground truthing exercise that
Yeah.
we happen to have access to because you're on council.
Right.
And we can stare and see what we're assuming in our estimate and what was included in your project and compare.
Right, right.
So, I
Well,
think we can do that.
I want to go back to what I started to say. You know, there are going to be some blocks where there isn't a big giant stormwater swale anywhere in the block. It seems like we should,
Well, but aren't we asking for them most places?
not if there's no need for it, not if it's not part of the master plan, not if it's not
If
a
there's-
necessary engineered thing.
We,
Right, on the bottom of your
we
street,
allow-
absolutely, that is one of the places, right? Because it's a
Ooh,
long
I mean,
downhill.
we've required them on, Stanley, I mean, in places that are not close to the river, that are flat, that are not.
we are asking folks to treat any storm, any runoff that they generate from their project, we are asking them to treat that.
Right.
In our estimate, the number that generated this, we have assumed cost, for pipe and other things I can't properly describe, even though what might actually come in is a lower cost element like a swale or, a planter, So we have to have something to calculate, and we have that included in here. But we are asking people, if they're creating runoff, that they're treating that.
Right, but if all you're doing is doing an internal division on a house, you're not creating any runoff unless you're adding parking or something like that.
Building a sidewalk.
Yeah.
The trigger for mitigating stormwater impacts is part of our MS4 permit we have with the state to discharge to waterways. And so that trigger is whenever it comes through the development permit process and more than 500 square feet of impervious surface is new or redeveloped. So if an example, if a new house is being built and that triggers frontage improvements, that whole project, even if they've got 20 feet of frontage or they're not, their whole house is more than 500 square feet, that project needs to mitigate all of its stormwater.
So in my case, I wasn't building a new home, but I was building a sidewalk and I was adding to the street width. So it probably went over the 500 square feet between what I had to add to the street and the
Right.
sidewalk. Yeah.
And then there's the question is if pervious sidewalks as opposed to impervious sidewalks.
Yep, so those are impervious reduction techniques that you can do. So if you want to use a pervious concrete on your driveway or the like. I can't recall off the top of my head if we have a pervious sidewalk detail in our public works standards, if we would allow that in the right-of-way. I can't recall that off the top of my head. But something like that on-site would be able to reduce their overall impervious surface.
Okay,
Anything else? I see scowls, everyone, okay.
Well, it's making me think about all the other things that we might want to, for later conversations about
Yeah.
the requirements for.
We understand we're we're pushing this forward as an interim, couple corrections we'd like to make now, and frankly, to try them too, and see if they're helpful to us. Knowing that a fuller suite of recommendations and policy language, is coming on a whole suite of topics.
Yep.
So,
Yeah, that's definitely the way I'm reading this. And I think it's nice that we're trying to do something as an interim step, because we are in that awkward space of, there's so much that's coming and there's so much that we're frustrated with right now. So I really appreciate that we get to do some baby steps.
do a little.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. I think that's the main thing in this section. I think I go away and library comes up and then come back for SDCs, or you want us to do SDCs?
If you want to go ahead and do STCs.
Oh, wait, I did want to,
You got another one?
yeah, back where we started, what was our first page?
Which one?
Oh, I wanted to talk about the right-of-way permits.
Okay.
So, there's a lot of scratch out and,
Yeah.
but where is you've scratched right-of-way use permit, but don't we have a right-of-way use permit?
That was just a formatting thing, because you can see there's right-of-way permit at the top, and then we had right-of-way use permit under right-of-way permit. It was just clunky.
Yeah.
Same permit, we just made the one heading instead of,
Yeah.
it was a false subheading.
Okay.
It's an
so the
organizational change.
Major, minor encroachment.
Yeah, and then
permits
we
are
were
really
call,
what we
yeah,
talked
we,
about as right-of-way use
we had a
permits.
title of encroachment, and then we were talking about minor encroachment permits under the encroachment heading.
Right,
It's just
right,
it was just cleaning it
Right.
up.
Weird artifact.
right.
yeah.
Okay.
And then, do you have other ones under there?
Nope, I think that's
Okay.
it.
So I have just,
Yes.
so what is the fee for planting a street tree?
The fee for planting a street tree.
So you have to go to.
$50?
$50.
$50?
Yeah.
Okay. That just might be another example where, you know,
Yeah.
because when you go and you look and you search the website for tree, you're not necessarily gonna land on minor permit application fee.
And as we keep moving through our tree process, there might just be other ways to incentivize, use our fees to incentivize some of what you're wanting to see. But right now it's $50.
Yeah, we are, isn't the board talking about not having that fee?
We're looking at, on the planting one, reducing the reduction of that fee, yeah.
Right, so trying to encourage.
Encourage, yeah.
Anything else on this one? Okay. Well, if you don't mind, let's jump to SDCs, because Dalton has a very adorable dog that is at doggy daycare and has to be picked up at 7, and I promised that he could leave. So SDCs are on page
SS 76?
SS 76, page 31 of the track changes. The vast majority of all of the lines that you're seeing in here is just that CPI. We went with the construction index on this one, right? So this is we had decided we were gonna do the cost of construction index, which this year is 0.83%. So the construction index has actually come in less than CPI. And so that was applied throughout. The modification, which, might
Wow,
actually
now,
just,
just to make sure I
Yeah.
got that right.
Yeah.
Last year, the CCI was 7.7%, and this year it's less than 1%.
Correct.
Wow.
yeah, and we actually, Joe and, who works for Bonnie, I asked, can you go back and see what happens? And it actually seems to follow that kind of a pattern where the second
jumps
year,
up
it jumps up
and
and then
adjusts.
is a lower number and then jumps up again. I think it's still the right
Tool.
tool. And I think it keeps us accountable to just the construction markets as well, right? So it tracks with what we're trying to build, so. Okay, this is the one where I have special Dalton help here in case I mess up how I describe it, which is possible. So that all makes sense. I don't think I need to explain it. The thing that's different is that we are proposing to show a reduced rate for ADUs and duplexes in each of the SDCs. And we have 65% as the percentage that we're using for those uses. Dalton, would you like to explain where the 65% comes from?
Sure.
Okay.
There was an ordinance back in the early 90s that established our first system development charges for, I believe it was for wastewater and water. And so it pegged a certain number for single-family homes and 65% of that for multifamily homes. And so since then, we've added a transportation system development charge, but used ITE trip generation numbers, which is a standard in the practice. And so there is no ADU or duplex category that ITE has. I think in their latest edition of their manual, it is multifamily low-rise, multifamily mid-rise, and multifamily high-rise, and then single-family detached. And so none of those really capture what a trip generation for a duplex or what an ADU is. There's no set definition attached to transportation data for that. So using the same kind of spirit of that 65% for multifamily, the history that we have on that for SDC charges, so the standard rate of a single-family detached would then be reduced to 65% for a multifamily, which is kind of what duplex and an ADU behaves as.
And so that applies to, I mean, our SDCs, not the ones we're passing through from other agencies, right?
They have their own sets of definitions. Water Environmental Services for their wastewater SDC, I believe it's 67% for duplex. And they treat ADUs as duplexes. They do have a definition for a duplex. They don't have a definition for an ADU. So,
Oh, but they do treat an ADU as something less than a single-family home?
yes,
Okay, well, that's good, at least.
yeah, they have equivalent dwelling units, and so it's 0.67.
Explain these columns, reimbursement and improvement.
So there's existing capacity within the constructed infrastructure. And so if you're taking away that capacity, then you're also going to be growing in that capacity too. So it's directly related to a different style of impact that development has. It's impacting the current usage as well as the need to expand it in the future. So we're able to absorb now their impact, but we also have to plan for their new impact too. And so that's kind of the difference between the two. There's a distinct financial difference about what projects can those be attached to. And so I'm not so familiar with those financial bins, but that's my understanding.
So, again, we know you all are thinking about all kinds of different options with respect to this type of housing. As you move ahead, this is just an interim step that we felt like we could apply fairly and consistently across the different categories. And so this is what we put forward as an option.
And on the water and the wastewater, as part of those master plans, we're reviewing the methodologies that were used to develop the SDCs.
Which is a way of saying you may be back with something different next year. We may have something, yeah.
Don't get too invested.
Yeah.
And one of the things we talked about is perhaps that scaling component to the SDCs. We've had that discussion with both consultants on that. So.
Great. Anything else? Okay. Thank you all very much. Thanks, Dalton.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so moving to library, that's on page 63.
Did you say 63 or 53?
63.
5-3,
63.
6-3. It's hard to hear in this
I
room.
know,
There's so
it
much
is.
back noise.
It is.
So the main thing that changed here was just adding in the fees for Library of Things. I believe you all heard about the program that Katie and her team has started through the library and the county. So the additional fees is just the replacement costs, is the overdue fines for Library of Things. So, and then there was some other just minor corrections. Any questions on library?
Does the Library of Things start before we move into the new library? Are you going to start it at the?
Katie, would you come up? Thanks.
We're hoping to have the library thing starting in September, countywide. We're going to start on a smaller scale, but we were I had a meeting today discussing what we're going to be purchasing. We do have that grant of $7,200. We will use all of it and then go from there. Right now, we don't have as much storage space or anything, so originally, I think the county wanted to start this more in the summer, June, July. It was just not possible to get everything up and running.
So when is there a time that you have, before you have to spend the money, or?
We have, we were given the option of taking it in fiscal year 19 or 20. We
Okay.
opted for the 20.
Okay.
So the only thing that's going to be determining when it all has to be spent is when their report is due of how we spent the money. So I don't have any deadline on that yet. So, but I'm kind of looking at that we're going to have at least 6 months that we will be spending the money, though we would kind of like to buy as much as we can up front and then see how things are checking out.
Are you accepting donations of anything, or?
The problem with donations is we're trying to have new items. We also need the instruction manuals and things like that. When you come to puzzles, as long as all the pieces are there, Duplo box, things like that, we could probably take, but we are trying to circulate things in boxes that they might have come in, that address like when I say Duplo blocks, Legos, we want the age appropriate, that it's listed and labeled in such a way. So otherwise, as people could just dump in all of their, it's like, no, these aren't good for 3-year-olds, these aren't good for 6-year-olds, So we are looking at what is donated, but we are also going to be using some of the items from our surplus of tools, like for gardening. We have shovels and rakes that aren't brand new, but they're in good condition. So we will be using things like that are in the cities that they've volunteered to donate for us.
Well, to that point, not that it has anything to do with the fee schedule, but when we were studying, trying to get tool libraries, and this is now 10 years ago, into the city, we talked to other tool libraries up in Portland and other places, and they said, once you have the library set up, hardware stores were willing to donate pretty expensive tools to the libraries.
And we're hoping they will, and we're going to be having this throughout the county. So every library will be looking for donations, but if we can go first, because we're, not all of them are doing this. Maybe half are doing this, so we're the first group that's coming out with these.
It's fantastic, yeah. Maybe I could like rent an electric drill or something.
It's, the biggest thing is, do you have the manual? That people, because we want to be able to have manuals. If we can download one, great, but we have to have manuals with anything that requires instruction.
Yeah.
Just to kind of cover us, that
Sure.
we gave you all this information. If you used it incorrectly, that's not our, that's
sure.
on you.
And if someone was hypothetically, let's say it is a electric drill, or whatever, and it comes with the manual and they use it, of course now it's not brand new anymore, it's, so I don't know that makes a big difference, but, so what happens if they lose the manual? Is there some vehicle that we have to be able to say, well, you need to pay for getting a new one or doing something like that? I mean,
There will
I don't know
be
what could
a
happen.
fee for replacing manuals.
or if something is broken or a piece is missing when it comes back or something like that.
There will be, that's why it says refer to librarians. So if they come back and they've lost 3 drill bits,
Yeah,
so then we have to replace those
Yeah.
because now it's an incomplete. So we'll estimate how much it costs. Now, you can't buy 3 drill bits, most likely. You have to buy the whole package again. But then now we have extras. So it just, we will be doing it all. We don't want, we want to have it available so people can come and try out something. So it's like, I don't know if I would want an Instant Pot.
Yeah,
And then they come,
exactly.
they use it for a week, like, wow, this was the best thing ever. I would want an Instant Pot. But it's not necessarily, like, this isn't to replace you buying one. This is just so you can try something out.
yeah, I think it's a great idea.
You can tell we're excited.
Could have used
Yeah.
an electric
A lot of
stapler this
questions that have
morning.
nothing to do with the fees.
It's replacement cost.
Battery operated or a big heavy duty one or something.
Good work.
Yeah. So, had to put wiring up on my fence. Keep neighbors' dogs out.
Okay,
Yeah,
good,
good.
thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, Katie.
Thank you.
Moving on to the next section, miscellaneous, which is on page 64. The main change here is that we increased the lien docket search fee from $12 to $32, and that's to really cover the administration portion of the accountant that puts these liens on or has to do searches and so forth. So, going onward to municipal court, page 65. The fees that changed here are the corresponding fees to the new parking permit fee of $70. So that's the over space line, the permit-only parking, and the over 1 foot from curb parking. But traditionally, in the past, we've also increased the overtime parking. So I wanted to bring up to council to get thoughts on the overtime parking rate, because it is $70. It is higher than other folks, other cities around the region. I believe, I have it right here. Portland charges $44. There's no fee for Westland. Oregon City is $20, but it increases $10 consecutively if it's on the same day.
You're talking about people who've stayed beyond the 2 hours or
Right.
whatever.
So if
Okay.
they stayed for an extra 15 minutes, they have to pay currently $60. So,
So why are we raising it from 60 to 70?
We received direction when we were looking at the parking pass discussion last year. And so we didn't want to just blindly increase it without bringing it to your attention that we're doing it substantially in comparison to the surrounding areas. If you're comfortable, we can leave it at 60, but that was the past discussion.
Well, so I,
Do you remember where we were?
because I mean, this is a one-time offense. So if you were trying to park and not buy a pass,
If you do it twice, it was worth
You
getting the
should have bought the
pass.
pass.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So and right now, we have people who are getting multiple tickets in a month. So they are absolutely blowing through their budget instead of buying a parking pass. But I'm not sure it has to be 100% of the parking pass cost, and so we wanted to bring that up just because it is starting to get substantially higher than the surrounding areas. If you'd like it to go up and equate to the same cost as the monthly parking pass, we can. Just wanted direction.
If we don't increase it, or if we reduce it from $60, what does that do to the parking program's ability to pay for itself?
the parking permit actually is, I'd have to do the analysis to see how much overtime parking it really covers, but the majority of the parking permit itself is covered by the permits that we sell, and the citations for not having a parking permit, but the variant for how much the overtime parking is, I do need to get that for you, yeah.
If you're comfortable, we can also leave it at its current rate and just not increase it, and that way you don't have a budget impact. And we can have a discussion about a change with a better understanding for next year when we actually bring you the full budget, and there would be ramifications for the staffing at that point.
I think that makes good sense to me.
Does that work?
Yeah, I can't remember what the reasoning was.
We were really trying,
Well, I think it was so people would
Trying to get
consider
people to
buying
do
passes.
permits.
Right,
But-
trying to push people in a
That's the
direction.
discussion that we had, if I remember correctly.
do you have concern?
No, I mean, I think let's leave it the same and wrap
We'll
it
come
on
back
to the
next
same
year.
conversation that we're going to have.
Sounds great. So we'll leave it at 60. We'll amend that
For all four of those, right?
Wait, leave it at 60 or move it to 70?
Leave it at 60.
Leave it at
Oh,
60.
Okay.
For just the overtime parking, but the other ones would remain the same as the monthly parking permit, correct?
No, I think,
You wanna
seems
do
me
all
they
of them at
kinda
60?
speak to the
All
same
of them at
issue,
60.
right?
Well, over the space line says that,
That's not the same as overtime parking.
right.
It's not.
Like a,
So-
neither is
1 foot from the curb either. I mean, permit parking, if you parked in the permit parking,
You should have bought a permit.
you should have bought a permit, so.
Yeah.
And maybe, I mean, just spitballing here, but maybe it should be the cost of a permit and you get a permit.
Here you
It's
go.
like, oh, you're a permit parker now, so there's your bill. I don't know, just throwing out crazy ideas. You chose to be a permit parker today. Well, congratulations.
Do we have, are we fully subscribed on our permits right now?
No,
No,
no, we do not sell out on our permits.
no.
I don't understand people.
I mean, I don't have any particular feeling on this either way. It's okay with me.
So 1 foot and over space line, I wouldn't
Stayed the
change.
same.
Yeah, leave those alone. The overtime parking, I
And
think
permit
leave alone to 60, right?
And permit only,
Permit parking, same, leave it all at 60.
those two,
Okay,
I don't know.
They're both substantially, I mean, there's still a huge disincentive.
yeah,
So
yeah, you do it twice.
you've really
Yeah.
covered a lot of cost.
Right, you might as well
Okay.
have bought a quarterly pass by then. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, so we'll remain them at 60.
Okay,
Okay, so, moving over to police, section 11, it's on page 75. A couple of weeks ago, you heard from the chief and Shannon regarding the alarm permit fees. So the change in the police fees this year is really related to what you heard about the new alarm permits. Just increasing the residential from $30, from $20 to $30, including now residential over 65, now has to pay $10. The business went from $20 to $50, and the alarm permit late fee went to $30, or is new, that's added, it's $30. That, and then also the corresponding false alarm fees went up. So where it used to be the first false alarm, first 3 actually false alarms, you would get no charge, but this now increases it so that after the second one, you will get a fee.
do we currently have any businesses in the city that sell guns?
In the city of Sawgrass. That's ours.
I can't think of one, but, so do people come to us for a permit when
Can
they
you come
bought
up
it
to the, thanks.
wherever else?
Come on over.
What was your question?
So we have a gun background check, right, which is if you're buying a gun, right? So if we don't have businesses that sell guns, do people still come to us? Do any of the businesses around here come to us for that background check? Is that why we have it? Or is it just in case a business opens up that does?
We've charged for this before. We've had different residents come in
That's what I was
and
thinking,
drop them off, but in my 5 years, I've only done maybe 3, so it's not very often.
So it's like a person-to-person gun sale.
Yeah.
Uh,
Or it's,
I didn't realize background checks were required in person-to-person setting.
it's more, it's not person to person, really. It's more of a background check on, I think it's like a firearm dealer is the ones that we've had.
Private dealers.
Yeah.
privately
Oh, the ones that
licensed.
are working out of their home,
Yes.
doing that.
Yeah,
sort of-
okay, got it.
Yeah, my youngest son does that, so all kinds of things he's got to go
That makes sense. All
Yeah,
right,
that does.
thank you.
Yeah.
And they pay us for their liquor license, even though we have really no say.
Yeah, so that is actually set by statute for what we could charge them. So we charge them the maximum that we're allowed to. But yes, I worked at the Liquor Commission before I came here, so I'm very familiar with that, what can deny a permit, but yeah.
So do they have to come in and apply to the city as well as applying to OLCC?
Yep, correct.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
For the chief, I mean, we
Yeah.
get a report from the
Right.
police that
Yeah.
says.
Well, I thought that was all referred from OLCC. I didn't realize they came in and
Yeah,
applied to the
Yeah,
city.
we don't get to do it with it. We could hate the idea of some particular business having it, and we can't stop it, but the chief can. I mean, if he sees a problem with, for whatever reason, their background or they, I don't know why you might deny it, but he actually can deny it.
We do a very short, basic background check on those permits, but they don't get denied very often.
And even if we don't recommend a permit, the Liquor Commission has the right to push forward a license over our recommendation. They have very strict laws or rules that allow them to approve, even if someone has a criminal background that's questionable.
Is there any other questions on the police department section? Those fees?
Thanks.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, so the next section that we need to cover is the utility section. I know we're gonna go over quite a few of those this evening with Peter's presentation, but there are some other changes that we wanted to point out. So that's on page 80, study session 80. So the stormwater fees, they increased by 14%. That was set through the Systems Utility Advisory Board several years ago, I believe.
Yes. to not pop up.
So,
We're talking about which one now?
sorry, the
Stormwater?
stormwater fee. So I'm skipping over the water and wastewater because
Because
we'll
they're
cover those
coming.
shortly. But the stormwater fee increased by the 14%.
What page are you on?
That's on page 80, study session
I'm
80.
sorry. It's
80.
hard for me to hear you.
80.
I'm sorry.
80.
Thank you.
I think part of that was, there's a lot of stormwater work that was part of the SAFE program and wrapped up into that, and that's one of the reasons why that 14% was projected into this year as well.
Right, I think that was the year before I got on council. But it was, yeah, the council of the time did an aggressive stormwater plan, so.
Yeah, because there were areas in the city that were flooding on a regular basis that even on the 20-year horizon still weren't being dealt with.
We also have a couple of large projects, and I'm asking Peter and Bonnie to correct me if I'm wrong on this, but we're paying cash instead of doing bonding for those projects. So we have things like the large pipe out here that's going to make McFarland finally move. We've had clay pipe stuff going on. What's the other one that we've got coming up? Oh, the Harrison and Maine. There's that pipe through the center point of the parcel that's an issue for us. So there's a couple of very large, expensive projects, and then the city can come back to you with a discussion about whether or not at that point you can stop pushing quite so hard or actually reduce.
Well, and the other thinking about that was, at that time, a whole lot of our stormwater was just piped directly to the creeks. So all that brake
Right.
fluid and all that crap would just end up in the creeks every time we had a rainstorm. And this was to be able to give the team the, bandwidth to be able to start moving towards where everything was treated.
Right.
And it's not cheap to do it, but I think it's important.
The next section is transportation. So those fees went up by the CCI, the Construction Cost Index that you heard earlier, the 0.83%. And then the other charges, I'm actually gonna let Peter describe. These are some changes that occurred with the connection fees. Some of it, Peter.
Yeah, so we took a more detailed look at those connection fees and really just looked at what were we trying to recover? And the fees that we have here now, the short side is the side of the street that's closest to the water main. What is it typically, what's the average cost to make that connection? And then that long side is the side of the street that's further away. So we took a look at what's our cost to install those services in terms of labor, material, and equipment that we bring out here. And those were really what those costs are. So that's where we're just recovering our costs associated with that work.
So those are a big drop.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And, so the cost to connect to the short side where I assume the water main is on the same side as of the street as the residence, that doesn't seem like a very big difference to run it under the street, which I guess is what you have to do if you're at the long side? Is that the homeowner's cost to run it under the street?
It is the homeowner's cost.
Responsibility, so
Yeah.
they have to do that, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
If I understood, yeah, these are costs that the homeowner would pay the city to.
But does the city actually run I thought, is the homeowner runs the connection
We will do
between the house
the
and
tap
Uh-huh,
and provide the materials and services and labor
uh-huh.
to do that. So this covers that work from the main to the meter box. Or
Oh, to the
vault.
meter box, okay,
Yeah.
okay.
And then we adjusted our hydrant meter usage fee to cover our cost and associated with billing and administration of those fees. So we left the deposit the same, but adjusted what the usage fee was.
What is that hydrant meter?
So that typically contractors will use it for construction purposes when they're building. So they'll come and rent out a construction meter, a hydrant meter that also has a backflow prevention assembly on it. So we can be protective of the system there. And they can get fairly expensive.
Is that
So back at stormwater, just a question. We've got these increases. We're increasing, it looks like, our low income, roughly the same amount we're increasing our single-family residential.
That's saying 50% of the cost.
So that's how we've been calculating, it's just
Yes.
50%? Okay.
So this comparison graph on SS 82, that's pretty different than what Wes had included in their packet that they used with the CUAB. They didn't really bring it before us when they came here, but the packet that they had in discussing their SDCs and their EDU projects and stuff with the CUAB, they had a comparison graph that showed us below some of these cities that this shows us being above, so kind of curious about that, yeah.
That was just on sewer, wasn't it?
Well, no, it purported to be an all. It had different colors of bar like this. It had different colors for each utility. I will definitely send you the link to that because I'd like to have that double checked. Because it was, yeah, we were near the bottom instead of near the top on their list. definitely Happy Valley, Wilsonville, Westland, were all higher than us on there.
So the discussion that I had with Greg last month, last couple weeks, was actually that we were higher. So we will confirm it. I did ask Peter and Joe to double check all these numbers this year, just to make sure that there was a consistency. But I think they're correct. But we'll get you a confirmation on that before we approve it.
And our street free, that includes the safe?
Yes.
Yeah, so it's Storm is one of the places we're heading.
Storm's expensive. When you look at the chart and look at how it compares to most of the other.
Am I remembering that Wes is charging less for the pipes?
For pipe maintenance.
For pipe maintenance than what
Yeah.
we are?
And that's
buying?
part of the discussion that I had with Greg. I have not gone into depth on that. If you'd like me to go into depth on that, we can. But it was sort of a tertiary conversation, and
Right, I
that was
know,
the
it's just,
general.
it was tangential to the whole annexation conversation, but it's, you know, if we're gonna weigh all things, we'll start having that conversation.
And I've got some discussion points that I can make during the presentation about the water and the wastewater specifically
Okay.
on some of those items there.
the place where we are disproportionate the most right now is our storm component. And unfortunately, we can't solve that this year because the way we did the SAFE program, the way we did all the package for the transportation piece required some of these pieces to get done as a part of those without having to cut back into roads and make improvements at a future date. That's why we're saying that in a year, we can come back to you and have a discussion about where we're at on those rates. But for now, because of how we package this going into the integrated transportation plan, it's really hard for us to take those out, or we won't have sufficient revenue to be able to pay for the parts that we purposefully were trying to do as a part of the system. So we think that next year we can come back and talk to you about that.
And actually, I have to apologize, I'm mixing apples and oranges in my head because it's the SDCs
Correct.
where Wes said we're one of the lowest.
Yeah,
We are one of the lowest. It's not the overall
Not the
utility, it's not the
ongoing
utility
rate.
rates. Yeah, yeah.
Interesting.
Okay, so the next section was the miscellaneous piece. Did you want to talk about that?
Is that,
Just
where's,
the, like, next, yeah,
right here? We did make some adjustments to the delinquent account fees and notices of termination, and those are just really based on what our cost is to go out there and bring those out there. There is a good-sized jump on the after-hours restoration of service. As part of we went from $85 to $110. We have a minimum callback based on our contract of 2 hours. So we have to pay somebody 2 hours at a minimum to come out there to do that and drive out there and post that. So that's where that number comes from.
How often do we have to do this?
I mean, it just depends. I mean, it could be once every couple months. It could be during the holidays, we get quite a few.
Yeah, okay.
So, yeah. Yeah, we are, right now, we shut off about 10, either businesses or households a month. That's actually considerably down compared to previous years. So we have a lot of systems in place now where we call the customers and we remind them. We have the door hangers that we've had before, but we have another way to actually contact the customers and say, you're about to be shut off. And actually, our utility technician, she's really great about calling the customers the day of and just say, hey, you're about to be shut off. Can you, would you like to make a payment? And so it's actually goes down quite a bit.
Do we track, so we've got various places where people qualify for low-income things. Do we track, are those people who are in our low-income process generally, or is it just totally random and it's just whoever, they just forgot to pay their bill or they're not
Yeah.
out of town or whatever reason?
We don't track it specifically, but just in general, whenever, it's usually folks that are not on a low-income assistance, because when they calling us and saying, I can't make the payment, is there anything I can do? The first thing I ask, or Joyce, our utility technician, asks, are you on low income? Because usually at that point, we'll see if they can apply. That helps them going forward. We'll take a look at the utility. We have the utility fund in the non-departmental that we sometimes use to help the customer out to get their water turned on or to make their bill so they don't get shut off for that month. But generally, it's usually customers that haven't done low income.
Okay.
Before we go off of the topic around our fees, our current utility fees, I did want to back up a little bit. The WES fees are a portion of the rate, and then we talked a little bit about the pipes and the maintenance of those pipes. So what is also happening right now, the reason that we are more expensive is the same reason we're having the increases in storm, which is that we are doing a disproportionate number of projects in order to get things in the ground before you pave. So we didn't bond for those resources. We're paying those in cash. That means that these are currently higher years because we're trying to get those projects in. And that was a decision at the time of bonding that we didn't want to go out and bond for those assets. So the caution I would say is that if you transfer the pipes to WES, the difference is whether or not they would put the projects in on the time frame you wanted and whether or not they would then come back and cut into the roads. It's not a question of staffing. The staffing piece is probably very comparable. This is a cost for trying to do the things at once instead of cuts. Okay?
Yeah,
Does that help?
I've got some additional information on that. So, if you look at it from the overall budget, I've got a slide that we'll see. Our treatment costs are roughly 60%, almost 61% of our expenses. And then in terms of capital, that's almost 14% of what we have in capital. But our materials and services component, like personnel, is like about 6% of our entire expenses in wastewater. And on the materials and services, that's about 5, almost 6% as well. But part of that is a franchise fee that goes to support transportation projects as well. So, both the water and the wastewater funds have a franchise fee that they pay to the transportation fund to support projects and other expenses as well.
It's a good teaser. Yeah. We'll get to that in a few minutes, but didn't want to pass it on.
Okay, so is there any other questions on utilities? We do have just the last section, which is the right-of-way section, utility license. It's on, starting on page 84. So these fees increase 3% annually. That's based off of the ordinance, I believe. And then there was also the new added small cell wireless component that was added this year. And that was based off of regulations that we needed to add that in.
Have we seen any of those yet?
No, I don't believe so.
I did get a recent update that we're at least hearing from more people, but we don't. I think we've got a couple of requests in for further discussion.
So we start the whole schedule with right-of-way fees. And then we have that at the end. I just wanted to make sure we sort of properly point people. Have footnotes or whatever that refer to, this does not relate to utilities or whatever, right? That make it clear that they're.
Well, this is the utility right-of-way license
Right.
fee. So that's why it's in the far back, is because it is related to utilities. So, like your electric, your telecom. But I'm definitely open for suggestions. If you think it needs to be moved to somewhere else, that's definitely can be
I
done.
just thought we should have a footnote or something at the front where we're talking about right-of-way fees to say, utility right-of-way fees are a separate thing, look here, look below in section X,
Are we getting caught up on getting paid? Do you know?
Yeah, we are. It's, we'll cover it in the next budget committee meeting. But yeah, it's, this quarter is better than last quarter. Yeah.
We're also, what we're realizing is the way that we are talking about these publicly are not actually in alignment with when we receive payments typically. And so they're off by about a week. So when we get the report out, it looks like we're delinquent, and then like a week or 2 weeks later, we get the payment, and then we're caught up. So it's happening sort of cyclically. So we're having some discussions with Reba about how to better capture that into the budget process. But in general, Reba's collecting at the rate that
I
we
was
expect.
thinking of the 2 or 3 telecoms that haven't paid for years.
I don't know. Which ones are you thinking?
Comcast,
Comcast?
and I
You
thought
know?
Verizon was
I'm looking
still
at Kelly.
outstanding,
She
too.
loves being the right-of-way specialist. Now that she's not the city engineer.
Yes, I believe Comcast is on that list, and so I believe where we're at with Comcast is they have agreed that they're going to comply, like we've reached agreement on that, but haven't fully negotiated the back payments. So I think there's some folks that have come into the fold but haven't negotiated the repayment for the time period that they weren't paying, so some of that's still underway. And there's a set of, I think, some minor corrections that might be required to the code to, is Verizon? Might be Verizon one of the ones that we have to work with. We might need some minor modifications before we can get that done, but.
Okay. Thanks.
Okay. Leave it to Peter.
Thank you, Bonnie.
Cool.
Yeah.
Thanks, Bonnie.
Can we take a quick break before
Sure.
we move to?
Take a
Like,
5-minute recess.
Really just a 5 minute. Just need to stand up.
Good, I need to eat a brownie.
All ready?
Let's do it.
So this is our second item, water and wastewater rate discussion, which will be led by our Public Works Director, Peter Pasquale.
Thank you. Good evening. I'm Peter Passarelli, the Public Works Director, and I wanted to spend some time this evening and talk about our water and wastewater rates and follow up with from our discussion we had in early April. So we met back in early April and discussed the recommendations from the rate consultant. We got some feedback from council on how we wanted the rates to look like, and we've spent some time with the consultant, Dan Casbaum, and put together some options and have recommended an option, a dual-tiered rate design that we'll go over and talk about. So, just to recap, the recommendations for the water was that we didn't need to raise the rates. We were getting sufficient revenue, but we needed to make some adjustments to the rate structures. One, to look at decreasing the residential fixed monthly charge, make some adjustments to the commercial and industrial fixed charges to bring them closer to cost of service, and make some adjustments to the commodity charge as well to make sure that we were net revenue neutral overall for that piece. The long-term projections for the water was after 2021, it looks like our financial projections indicate that we need to increase over that period of about 2.5% each year. And then on the wastewater side, the consultant recommended, based off of financial projections and our revenue requirements, a 2.5% increase for each of the next 2 years, and making some adjustments to our rate structure as well, to revise the billing and administration charge to a fixed charge and adjust the commercial and industrial larger customers, so their charges were based off of their meter size as well. Make some adjustments to our residential fixed commodity charge to decrease that, and then maintain the current low-income discount at 50%, both on the monthly charge and on the EDU charge and the volume charge as well. And then the long-term projection on the wastewater were 2.5% those follow-on years as well.
So, just to be clear, that 2.5% is gonna cover Wes's increases as well?
It does,
Because they're
yeah.
talking about 5%.
5%, yeah. So
Right.
the Wes's treatment charge, that 2.5% covers that 5%. Yeah.
So more or less, we're not increasing our pipe section at all. And that's what that breaks down to, that all of that increase is really the west.
Well, part of it is that, you know, we're both the utilities are financially sound enough where we have the cash balances to maintain the rate structure and not have dramatic jumps to cover that. But, you know, the 5%, the Wes's 5% increase in the charge isn't 5% of the total revenue requirements that we need. So it's just, it's that 60% of that general cost, so. So at our April work session, I think we had a good discussion about the rates and addressed some concerns, and talked about some different things on how we wanted to look at the rates as a city. One of the things that stood out was the fixed customer charge. That it's a regressive charge on low-use customers. And that's a little bit different than necessarily low-income customers. We're talking about the people that don't use a whole lot of units during the month. Some low-income, the average low-income customer uses about 6 CCF. So they're not necessarily the same. But we also wanted to address affordability, both for low-income and low-usage customers, and also be cognizant of commercial customer impacts if we've made dramatic changes to those customers as well. We talked about revenue stability, you know, making sure we have fixed costs associated with our both utilities. They're very infrastructure intensive. There's a lot of maintenance associated with that, and there's not necessarily a whole lot of variable cost. I have a slide further on that shows you our fixed cost recovery versus our commodity cost recovery, the variable cost recovery for each of the utilities, and how the different rate structures that I've outlined change those cost recovery pieces. We also had some concern about, we've seen a steady decline in overall consumption throughout the nation in terms of water use. So, you know, there's costs are increasing on to maintain the systems, and on the other side, you've got a decrease in overall consumption, generally because of water efficiency. We talked a little bit about a rate stabilization reserve that could possibly be part of a rate where you have an overall all commodity charge. And I had a discussion with Dan about that, if we wanted to establish a specific rate stabilization charge. He suggested that we would look at something that's about 10% of our revenue requirements, and thought that you would need to get to that 10%, you would need an additional 2% over each year to go there over a 5-year period, so you didn't see a large drop, increase. So generally, I think the focus was we wanted to move our larger customers closer to their cost of service and then reduce the per gallon cost for our low usage customers. So from this discussion, we put together a couple different options. I probably talked a little bit about this already as well, but the consumption demographics for our utility, for our water utility, almost 90% of our water utility customers are residential customers, 88.7%, but they only use about 56% of the billed consumption. We've got about 180 low-income customers on average, fluctuates a little bit. And we have about 1,700 low-use customers that use three units or less a month. And that fluctuates from time to time, too.
And there is no correlation between that and the low income at all?
Well, certainly there are low-income customers that are low-use customers, but the average consumption for the low-use customer, when you look at that customer class, they're around 6
For the low income.
For the low income, yes.
The low-income customers are usually families, so they're gonna use a lot more water.
Sure.
And then I did want to point out the consumption trends. And I put up our water production slide over the last, from 2005 through 2018. And you can see up until about 2009, we were generally, the trend was we were increasing in production. And since then, the trend's been to lower consumption. And we haven't made up that gap over that time. I mean, certainly weather plays a big role in that as well. But the trend has been downward since 2009.
And do you happen to know, I mean, you might not, and that's okay, but do you happen to know if the 55% or 56% of consumption by residential versus other uses, is that pretty much, was that the same in 2009? Was it the same?
I don't know that answer, but I could certainly look at that. It's probably not a lot different.
It doesn't vary a lot?
Yeah, it's probably not a lot different. I mean, we're generally a more residential community. When I was back in Illinois, we had one of our customers was a pork processing plant. They represented 30% of our water, wastewater, electricity, all as a customer. So, it's those industrial customers and commercial customers can really make a big difference.
So, that trend makes you skittish financially, but it's not a bad thing. I spent yesterday afternoon down at Clackamas County hearing a presentation by the university around climate effects and water providers. It was water providers that were in the room and the various things that are occurring that are going to be driving availability of water, difficulty of treating that water, all of those things. It's going to be driving it in a hard direction. The one area of study they didn't do, they were concentrated sort of on the Clackamas watershed. So they hadn't really done a lot of groundwater recharge, but they did say that if the pattern they're expecting, which is bigger storms more infrequently rather than the kind of constant drizzle that the Pacific Northwest has experienced, would slowly start to deplete the groundwater, because you wouldn't have that constant charging.
Sure.
You would have a lot more runoff. suspect that all of our neighbors who are dependent on runoff water are going to then eventually start tapping into the groundwater, and it's the same aquifer. So it's, you know, it's a good trend.
We actually, I want to be clear about why we're showing this. It's actually not because we have a problem with our water use going down. We're thrilled that our water use is going down. It's in the best interest of the environment and our community to treat less water and for us to have a long-term reserve. So that's actually not our concern. We've been showing this in part to show you just the volatility of what it means for income for the projects that you guys are approving. But our goal is this number goes down by a lot. So I just want to be clear that we've heard council on that front. That's not our intention.
The other thing I wanted to mention about our water utility, we talked a little bit about the wastewater, on the wastewater side about, our expense profile. So on the water side, 38% of our expenses are associated with our capital program. So we have a very capital intensive budget for water.
Is that high relative to other cities?
Well, it's high in respect that we're not financing it, that we're paying for it as pay as you go. So if you certainly could have a different financial projection where you're going out to borrow to pay for some of these improvements, that would reduce your overall rate structure out in the future. Right now, we've got the money in our bank right now. Our rate structure is set to pay for those right now. But in the future, you can smooth out and reduce rate impacts by borrowing, by not saving.
But over the long haul, doesn't that just cost us more money?
It's a philosophy difference. And that has been John Stoll, your budget chair's philosophy discussion that he'd like to have, is whether or not taking debt in this arena in particular is more prudent. And we're doing this budget training next Monday, and I'm going to defer that conversation to that dialogue because I think it's a policy call, and it's a really big policy call. But the piece that I also want to bring up is when I arrived here, the council that was seated at the time, my understanding was that there were some delayed improvements, some investments that hadn't been made by past councils. And this council, or that council at the time, wanted to push to see those improvements made and to get us back up to a certain speed. We've been pricing it to do that. Now, whether or not we have to continue to price it at that rate, it's the same discussion we just had on storm, or we come back to in future years with reductions. I doubt we will, but 2.5% is not even keeping up with inflation. So there's a certain amount of us looking for that in these rates, finding a way to not oversaturate the cost to the resident or to the user. But I'm going to just go back to at the time when I got here, the feel was that you all, whoever was seated at that point, wanted to make these improvements, didn't want to cut into roads multiple times, wanted to see them done as a package deal. And so that's what we're pricing right now.
So in addition to that 38%, though, there's another almost 8% of our revenues that are a franchise fee that go to the transportation fund. So both the water and the wastewater are subsidizing transportation projects as well through those franchise fees. So I don't know, I can't speak to other communities if they charge their own utilities a franchise fee as well for that work. So I mean, that's part of that mix of those dollars there.
My guess is, and again, this was probably before my time, my guess is that you were doing that because the roads were in such disrepair, and when you cut them, it does degrade them. And so we were cutting into roads that were further degrading an already poor inventory. But I'm happy to have Reba look at that as a part of our discussion moving forward if you'd like us to. Kelly's looking at me like she wants to say something.
No, I just want you to say that again.
What I'm saying is that right now, we charge ourselves a franchise fee for our utilities existing in the right-of-way, and we do that to the transportation fund to offset the cost of cuts. We just need to make sure that those are still the right costs.
So we put together 4 options, and I've given you a larger chart to look at, a paper chart that you can look at if you can't see it on the screen, because I know it's hard to read up there. And I wanted to compare that to our current rate structure. So the first option there is, I've titled it Option 1, and that option just basically cuts the fixed residential charge in half and increases the commodity charge, the volume charge, from $3.94 to $4.22. Makes adjustments to the larger customers as well in terms of their fixed charges. Option 2 is an all commodity rate, so that's the charge where all of our revenue comes from the volumetric charge, and that increases it to $4.74. That certainly has a large impact on our larger water users, commercial customers. The third option is a reduced residential customer charge, cut that one in half, but also move all of the larger customers to their full cost of service on their fixed customer charge. So if you look at, for example, the 6-inch meter customer, currently right now they pay at $190 a month, and their cost of service would be almost $650 as for that meter. So that moves those fixed customer charges on those larger customers to that piece. And then the fourth option, which was our recommendation, is this dual-tiered charge that basically provides a discounted rate for the basic water services for low-use customers, for those first customers that use up to 3 units of water. And then the remaining charges are increased. Units 4 and on jump up to a higher charge.
So that's the unit charge on top of a reduced fixed charge? That's not an all commodity charge, right?
No, that is not an all commodity charge.
Okay.
So you can see, so if you're a low-use customer that uses up to 3 units, your fixed customer charge is only going to be $3.69 a month. And they pay $3.94 for each of those units.
So is it $3.94 in total, or $3.94 for each unit?
For each unit,
Okay.
plus the $3.69 is the fixed customer charge.
Yeah.
So I've given you another chart that compares them. It's the colored chart there, the water rate comparison, cost comparison. And on the bottom of it, you can see all of the different options, what it costs per unit, what the customer pays as it increases up to unit 10. So, the first bar is our current rate. And this is residential only right here that you're seeing. And then the other 4 options. So looking at that option 4, for those first 3 units, there's a discount compared to those other rates. And then once you get to that 4th option, it jumps up to that $24.58.
So effectively, we're also building in a conservation incentive.
Under which one?
Yeah.
Under the dual-tiered one?
Yeah, under 4.
It's a slight one. We can, as we move forward, if this is the the council's desire to use this rate, to set this rate, we can look at how that works and make adjustments to the tiered system and perhaps add in additional blocks to promote conservation.
Yeah, it's an interesting idea, and I like that it has that potential for flexibility in the future once we've tested it out a little.
So,
And so would this be based on, say you're a gardener and you're using more in the summer, but you are under the 3 CCF in the winter months, so you would pay the lower rate when you're under it, and you'd pay the higher rate when you're over it?
absolutely, right, yeah.
Just
So
each
month
month
to month.
Okay.
It does provide some complexity for our billing staff that will need
That was
to work with, but make some adjustments to how we track the billing, but I think it's doable.
The utility system has the capabilities to do it. It's just a matter of setting it up and timing and training and that kind of thing.
So the one other thing I wanted to mention on this was, actually I had an error on the chart. It should be 407, the remaining volume charge is 407. So once you hit 4 units, you're paying $4.70 per unit, not 401. It's just a typo there.
Where,
So it's off by 6 cents. At the very end, on the
On
right-hand
water
side,
summary, not the color graph.
this one,
Yeah,
there,
this one,
That,
right here,
the remaining unit, yeah.
407 instead of 401.
correct.
but the numbers that you see in there have the 407 in there. If you go to the next slide, I wanted to put together a cost per gallon. I know that was one of the questions that was asked last time. So on the far left there, I've got the customer 1, which represents our largest commercial customer, industrial customer, a low-use customer that uses 1 unit, and then a low-income customer that uses 1 unit. And this would be what the cost per gallon would be. And each unit is roughly 748 gallons.
So just to make sure I'm reading this right, so under the residential low income, the dual tier gets you the lowest rate for 1 CCF for low income.
It does. And that's because we waive the fixed charge for that
Correct.
low-income customer.
What happens, so you also said that the average was 6 CCF?
The average residential customer uses 6 CCF. Now that might not necessarily be the median customer, but that's what that average is. If you take out all of the low-income consumption and divide by how many low-income customers there are.
And that is definitely parsing out just the residential.
Yes, yeah.
That's what I was trying to.
So the dual-tiered system, with the exception of the commodity one, reduces that gap between the largest customer and the lowest customer. And there's opportunities as we design the rate in future years to continue to reduce that gap if we increase.
You don't have, I'm totally lost now. So customer 1 is the largest.
That's the largest.
And their per gallon rate is pretty similar across all of them. It doesn't fluctuate much.
It goes up with
Except
low
that
commodity, with all commodity.
Yeah, and it's because their fixed customer charge is such a small percentage of their overall bill.
And then just so that it may have been in the report, I apologize, how many 6-inch do we have?
We have 1 6-inch customer.
So I just want to make sure everybody knows that when you look at how, under that formula, how those changes would come out for the fixed costs, only 1 company would end up going up, or would, let's say, would go up to 343. And the rest of them, when we were looking at, I think we had less than 10 on the 4-inch. I mean, it's just, it's not a substantial amount, but I do need to disclose that in some of these cases, the 4-inch customers are affordable housing units, because these are typically used as larger water connections for apartment complexes. But that is a minimal cost in the total water cost. So the rate overall is still going to be fine, but I'm just letting you know, when you look at these fixed costs, we don't think this is going to be a substantial impact to the company to increase them to the actual cost of service.
But you're
Um,
looking
is that
at
fair?
option 1, right? And
No, I'm looking at option 4.
You are looking at.
I am. So I just wanted to make sure we were really clear. There's sort of been this concept that the business community are the ones who are eating those larger lines. They're not. They're eating some of them, but not all of them. So we have government agencies in there. WES actually is in there. School districts, schools are in there. Low income is in there. And then we have a couple of large users. In some cases, we have, and I'm not going to name them because I don't want to, but we have a beer producer in town. They actually have a unique payment plan because of how we calculate their water retention on site. They use so much water, but so much of it is sold. So they don't have to pay the same rate for discharging because they don't discharge as much as you normally would if you were using that much water. So there's a bunch of stuff that goes into these calculations. Our general agreement is that under option 4, you're not having a huge impact, but you are correctly sizing the fees to those uses. Does that make sense? Okay.
One of the other slides that I have near the end too sort of introduces some metrics to look at affordability for low-income customers. So how it affects customers in relationship to the percentage of their income, and also as it affects them in terms of what does it cost if they were working a minimum wage job, how many hours do they need to work to pay their water and sewer bills. So I have that a little bit further. So the goal is, as we move towards the future, to continue to try to narrow that gap between our largest customer and our smaller customers in terms of that per gallon cost, to try to reduce the regressiveness of those fixed charges. I did want to show as well how we recover the rates, our revenue. So currently, our fixed cost on our water utility, we capture about 17% of our total revenue from that fixed cost, and about 83% of it is covered through the volumetric charge, the commodity charge. The dual-tiered option reduces that fixed cost to 15% and pushes it to 85%.
So the dual tier causes the average residential customer to have an increase.
A slight increase.
Part of what we've been, and this isn't a statement that this is the one you guys should choose. Part of the goal has been, how do you also put into place that conservation goal that we were talking about at the very beginning? So if you use less than the average home, then you will start seeing some benefit of that, and that's been our goal. So it's really us trying to do both, trying to do all the things that we've talked about, but I appreciate Peter trying to find some interesting ways to walk that path.
Yeah, the dual tier one for the average customer, which also is a 6-unit customer, it's a 39 cents a month impact.
So option 3, the reduced residential customer charge, removed to full cost of service. Explain that one a little more, please.
So that cuts the fixed customer charge for residential customers in half, increases the commodity charge, but on the fixed charges for the commercial and industrial customers, the larger customers, it moves their charge to what the cost of service is what they actually should be paying for that cost of service. So you see the increase for the
So greatly,
4-inch customer from $128 a month to $307.
Which is their actual cost of service.
That's what the cost of service is.
We-
But we're generally moving in that direction over a period of years and trying to.
so explain what that means, that that's their cost of service. I mean, their cost of service is, once the line is in, it doesn't cost us anymore to serve a 4-inch line than a 2-inch line, it's just the commodity charge, right?
Except somewhere 20 years down the road, we're gonna replace that.
Well,
Or 30
it's,
years down the road.
it's
Well,
the, it's
yeah.
the, it's the cost associated with the administration, the meter reading, the billing, and then the cost to serve that aggregate customer, those customers that are in that 4-inch customer class. So, to serve what their unique needs are as a customer. So we build our system to provide water based on the customer's demands. And 4-inch customers generally have larger demands. They're using more volumes of water. We have to pump more water. We have to have water mains properly sized to serve them. So there's a lot of there are certainly those fixed costs associated with those.
So why is, on this chart, the reduced, that third option, why is the fixed recovery cost lower? It seems like the fixed recovery cost should be higher.
Well,
Because you're dramatically reducing the residential cost, and that is a large percentage of the fixed cost that we pull into the city. You're reducing it by 50%.
But not in comparison to the other ones.
Yeah, but 86% of the customers are residential customers. So when you reduce their fee by 50%, it's just gonna have a larger, it's a big enough aggregate number of people that you're cutting in half, that total, for the total price is, and I'm looking to Peter, make sure I'm not messing this up. So the grand total of that just has a greater impact, a 1 to 2% impact in comparison to spreading it out. I'm confirming.
But you've lowered I mean, option 1 also has the same fixed price.
Option 1 has the same,
And option,
it's got an increased volume charge.
right, I get that.
So
But
the-
but your chart that showed what percentage came from fixed versus commodity, that doesn't seem, that third column, that next to last column, doesn't make sense to me, because all of the, taking off current, the rest of the columns are the same basically as to what the fixed cost is for residential users. I mean, on the 4th, it's a little bit lower, but for the low use. But,
Well, so.
oh no, on the 4th, it's, okay.
Yeah, so the commodity charge on options 1 and 3 are larger than on option 4 across the board. So that increases that commodity piece.
Okay.
So the reduced residential one, we're bumping that up to $422 from $394. Reducing the fixed residential customer charge by a half, and then on that option 3, it's $414. So there's less captured by the commodity, but a little, than option one, but a little bit more on the fixed charge.
Okay.
Peter, on option 3, just going back to the 6-inch line, what percentage of the total bill is $649 under this scenario?
Tiny.
I know, that's why I just want to make sure
Well,
that.
the 6-inch customer that we have is not a large water user.
Okay,
They
It's
do it
not
for
our largest
fire
wa-
purposes? It's not our big water
It's
user?
somebody that, the facility that they use, that they moved into already had that 6-inch service. So our larger customers are,
All on 4?
well, our largest customers are 2 inches and, 2 inch, 3 inch, and 4 inches, the top 10 customers, so, in a mix.
Are they on the right meter size for what they're doing? I mean,
They're
are
on-
they undersized?
They're able to
Pull it off.
pull it off and get what they need to do, so, yeah.
Right, interesting.
so knowing that 6-inch customer, can you just, is this going to be a larger hit than we're expecting, I guess is my question.
It would,
Knowing
yeah,
that it's
if you went to that 649, that would be a much larger hit on that
So
6-inch
that's just,
customer.
but that is one customer.
That's
There's
that
only
customer.
one customer in that, yeah.
And is that a customer that can switch to other services?
Well, the problem
For
is that
water?
the line is in. Are you saying could they go to another provider? I don't believe so. I believe they'd be here. But it's still, it's going to be a big hit for
So
them.
they're using water like they're a 4-inch customer or a 2-inch
Or a
customer
2-inch
or something?
customer.
I mean, just ballparking.
I can tell you in a second, real quick here.
Because
They use about
I know.
144 units a month.
and what
But
is
I
the
don't know what that
average?
compares to.
Yeah.
What are our top 10 users using?
Yeah.
Oh,
Well, there's a top 2 users.
yeah.
And then you're into a lower bracket. And that lower bracket are all the things that I've already named. So it's not necessarily
Schools,
what you're thinking of.
hospital,
Yeah, schools, hospital,
multifamily.
other government agencies.
Yeah, they use
Those we should
over
hammer.
3,000 units a month.
So 20 times as well.
So, just throwing out a concept. I'm liking the option 3 system, and then because this is an oddball situation with the 1 6-inch customer, if we were to reduce that down to where they're paying the same as a 4-inch, unless they change their use and all of a sudden they're using it like it's a 6-inch, then their impact it's going up, it's almost doubling. No, it is doubling, more than doubling, but at least it's not tripling.
Hey, Bonnie, on that front, if we were to go down that path, I know that we have different agreements that we make with different businesses because of how they use it at times. I would almost recommend that you keep the rate schedule correct and then give us direction to fix that one problem for the current user who's currently not using it as a 6-inch line, so that it automatically triggers to the right rate with a new user if it's there, instead of it getting lost in the
Sure.
shuffle, if that's possible. Would that be fair? Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, that wouldn't be a big hit to us, but it would be less of an
An impact to them.
impact to them.
So before we get too excited about option 3, is there more information you have to share in your presentation, Peter? Because in your report, I see some things about option 3 that give me pause.
Can I ask what things those are, and then we can address them?
Well, I'm just saying that the option results in the average residential customer seeing a 7.5% decrease, while the low-income customer sees an increase of 5.2%.
Because all of a sudden, we're now charging low-income customers,
No, because we waive their base rate.
right?
So we're moving
Oh, I see.
the rate.
Right. I guess I don't understand what you don't like about option number 4.
Yeah.
That the average customer in Milwaukee is gonna be paying more for water.
Yeah, but how much more was it, Peter?
39
It's,
cents.
39 cents a month. Okay.
okay,
The cut, yeah,
it's true.
they pay 39 cents, it'll be 39 cents a month.
I mean, if we're making the announcement, we're not raising water rates and everybody's water bill goes up. It's like,
Their bills are going to go up because we're also going to be
Entire bill
approving
is
other things
Right.
that are going to go up.
Yeah, we're not making that announcement.
And
Yeah, there's
And
no
most
announcement.
most people don't really look at their utility bill and see exactly what those charges are, and they don't understand part of them, and,
Right.
I mean, because I have people all the time talk to me about their water bills, but they don't mean their water bills, they mean the entire
thing.
utility bills. And I know for me, if I were paying less for stormwater, I would be in a really good sweet spot, but that's my highest
Increase.
highest item on my,
Is it over?
Well, it's
on
the
my
highest
utility bill.
increase.
Wastewater?
It's
Yeah.
the highest increase that
Not
you guys have
wastewater,
seen.
Highest
over the last
increase,
Yeah.
but not the highest actual charge.
No, it's the highest actual charge.
No, it's not highest actual charge. I don't
Highest
think it
actual
is.
charge is sewer.
Yeah.
Well, okay, yeah, that might be, but
Fine.
stormwater, yeah.
Storm has been your biggest increase over the last several years, and that's
Our
part of
biggest
why
increase
Peter
has
and I
been
are
in
here making a
stormwater. Yes,
commitment
that is
that after we have expended some
Yeah.
really big projects, that we come back to you and talk about whether or not we can eat that.
Well, based on what the mayor said about his conversations regionally, that might not be a safe assumption.
It may not.
We all need to be rethinking where we're getting our water and how we're using, whether or not we're storing more water as opposed to pulling it out of the ground.
So that water piece, that's something that is part of our water master plan that we're looking into, the climate impacts and seismic impacts as well.
And I'm not speaking to the water rates.
Oh, okay.
No,
I
sorry,
thought you were
I'm
saying
looking,
just the
I'm
water.
looking at your entire, I'm looking at your entire bill
utility bill.
Right.
and figuring out on some of the higher infrastructure pieces as those get checked off after being greatly delayed, that we may be able on that overall bill to come back to
To start
next year.
backing off it a little bit.
But water's not, we're not planning on bringing you a decrease in water.
So I think what I liked about option 4 was the fact that we were providing the low-use customers, people that didn't have a big demand on the system, a decrease in their rates. We were making that fixed customer charge less regressive than it is. And so,
Yeah.
yeah, and that was, I think, the feedback that I got from council, that we got from council last month, was trying to reduce that fixed customer charge. We're providing at a reduced rate water for those essential services that people use. So, once you get up above the three units or so, those are, you tend to move into those average customers that are using water for other things, maybe perhaps washing their cars or watering their lawns or things like that, but.
Well, and you also see the commercial increase that better captures their cost for those fixed
Which was-
costs.
My point was more that I was trying to move us away from the residents subsidizing industrial users,
Yeah.
which all of, both of those systems do that to a greater or lesser degree. All three of those systems do that to a greater or lesser degree.
Option 4 works well towards getting to that better balance.
It's narrowing that gap between the largest customers and the smallest customers.
It does work as conservation too, because I'm gonna stay under 3.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that the conservation benefits can be available to all of the residential customers that want to take advantage of them. I guess
It
is
is-
nice.
Has anybody ever
Who's
done,
on family size? I mean,
Right.
so many of our,
that's where I was about to go. Has anybody ever done a study on what it costs, like just
Well-
not washing the car, not keeping your lawn green all summer, just survival sort of level water usage.
We looked at Counselor Parks's bill specifically to try and understand this, and she's seen family in her household fluctuate over the last couple of years, and we could see it pretty dramatically fluctuate. So when she was alone, it was she would have qualified, I believe, under the low-use
But
customers.
that's a teenage girl. Teenage girls throw the whole.
She's actually in her 20s, but still, and she was using a lot of water.
Mine.
One of the things to remember, though, for the low-income piece, if you decide on option 4, is that I believe our program targets the commodity, not the commodity, the
The fixed
fixed
charge.
price. So for the families, this will jump up to that $869, but those families are already covered through our program where they don't pay that rate, they only pay their water. So the difference for them, if they are in a family and they're suddenly paying the higher rate, is actually only 7 cents difference between the lower use and the higher use. So I just wanted to make sure everybody remembers it's a little impact, it does encourage conservation, but it's not going to be the same level of impact as doubling their rate, their base rate. Okay?
And I would just, I've said this before, but we have as being members of the Water Providers Consortium, there's a whole website full of tools about conservation. And we could be making more of that.
Aerators and.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And
All kinds of
you know,
things.
the Energy Trust as well. You know, you can get their home energy kit, and they provide those water aerators and things like that. Certainly, that would be something that we'll look towards doing, is making sure that our low-income customers are taking advantage of those aerators to save on water.
Shower heads, they'll have, and they have the capacity to, also they do bulk buys, and we might want to do some kind of giveaway or something like that.
Counselor Beatty, can I get you closer? Because I think it's an important message, actually.
Yeah, there's just, there are things we can do with and through the Water Providers Consortium to help promote conservation, and, they even do bulk buys of shower heads, low-flow shower heads and things like that. Maybe we
Thanks.
offer in some way.
So can I get a motion before we keep going down? Do you need a general motion? Are we selecting? Yeah,
Yeah.
general direction from all of you. Are you guys generally in agreement that option 4 is where we're going? So if we, okay, so when we bring you the rates, we're gonna calculate it based on that. Okay,
And I've got it right up here, actually.
perfect.
So this is just our water rate comparison. So we're really in the middle of the pack there in terms of those regional communities. And you're seeing that 39-cent increase on the average customer. The customer that uses 6
CCS.
CCF a month.
Looks good.
Yeah, that's a 39-cent difference. That's the 39-cent.
Yeah. I think we do. Yeah.
It's interesting.
And then I've also got up there the cost per gallon that you can see for the different,
Is it like Oswego providing Tualatin with their water, or one of those, Tualatin or Tigard?
They have a intertie, they have some,
There's some complicated thing.
there's some complicated thing. They've just built a lot of infrastructure.
Right,
Yeah.
and they're pulling water out of
Which is
the
why they're at
Clackamas
the
River.
north, that's why they're at the high end of that, yeah.
Yeah.
And Stephen Lashbrook can tell you all about the deal.
Yeah, I don't know if it's the
don't wanna know.
Tualatin River, or,
It's Clackamas.
really?
They pull their water
It
from
is,
Clackamas.
it's the Clackamas, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, there's several cities pull their water out of the Clackamas, which is,
Well, and some pull it out of the Willamette, and there's a Willamette treatment.
Ooh, thank you.
Yeah.
yum, yum.
Okay.
just a little bit on wastewater demographics. So, it's generally the same, we've got the same customer base. But one of the things we do have different there is we charge by EDUs for the treatment piece. And that's something that we do, I think, a semi-annual evaluation that we send to Wes on how many EDUs that we have. This is the latest number of EDUs that we have. Wes is in the process of redefining what their EDUs are, what that means, how they define that. That's something we'll be doing as part of our master plan, to look at how they redefine it and how we should define EDUs for our billing structure, but right now, we've kept that the same. And
So
then-
this is what we really think our EDU counts is. 6141 is single family,
That's the single-family EDUs, you're right, yeah.
and 3279, okay.
Yeah, we do a report every quarterly, actually, that we need to report to. So it looks generally correct.
I got it, yeah, I got it yesterday from Joyce. So.
Yeah, so.
But I did want to point out again, so as our largest expenses in wastewater is related to our treatment costs. So 61% of our expenses relate to treatment. So we not only pay Wes for treatment, but we have customers that are, their wastewater is treated by Portland. Not very many, but there are some. And then I think there are a few from Oak Lodge as well, customers that we have. Just depended on geography, so. In terms of the cost recovery, right now, our commodity charge recovers about 29% of our revenue. And the fixed charge covers 71%, and that's because of that EDU charge that we have as part of our rate structure.
I'm sorry, say that again.
29% by commodity, 71% by fixed charge. So it's basically flipped from the water side. The recommendation that I have up here moves that cost recovery from, on the commodity side, from 29% to 35%, and then from 71 to 65%. So we're reducing that difference there. So I've provided you another sheet here with just the option here for wastewater. So you can see up at the top, there's current fees, residential, low income, and commercial. And what we're doing is reducing our residential fixed charge in half, making a slight adjustment to our volumetric charge from 294 to 362. And then we're also expanding out that commercial customer classifications, so it's based off of the meter size. So there's a different charge for each of those. And then in terms of the overall customer impacts there, there's actually, for the average customer, there's a slight decrease of about 50 cents.
And the way we measure volume is not actually a direct volume measurement. We just take the winter month water use and assume that all of that's going into the sewers.
Right. Those other months, the water isn't going there. So one of the reasons why that, we have such a large fixed component in terms of our cost recovery is that wastewater treatment piece. And Wes, they want to make sure that they have the revenue that they need to maintain their systems. So they charge us that charge by EDU.
So I'm confused, though. Didn't you start out telling us we were looking at 2.5% increase? So
Well,
how
it is,
this?
but the average residential customer sees a slight
decrease.
50-cent decrease on that.
Wow.
And that's because we're cutting that customer charge in half.
Mm-hmm.
So we're going from $9.12 to $4.56. And you have to get up to 7 units or so before the volume charge is high enough to
Have taken out.
make up that difference, yeah.
Yeah. Wow.
Cool. Good.
So it sort of works its way out between the difference between the water and the wastewater piece. And then I just wanted to show you what our typical water and sewer bill paid for. So this is combined water and sewer. So our average customer pays about $3 a day. So that's the average family, using about 150 gallons. So you multiply 150 times the number of months, and that's about that 6 cubic CCF customer. That costs about $2 per gallon for combined water and sewer.
2 cents per gallon?
2 cents per gallon, yeah, I'm sorry. I said that wrong, 2 cents per gallon. And you compare that to a bottle of a gallon bottle of water, one of those plastic bottles, that's about 94 cents, about $1. And that 150 gallons, that's sort of generally how you can see customers use that water. That's just sort of an example there.
150 gallons daily.
This is where I'm going to make my plug for using a front-loading washing machine, which uses about half that amount.
Really?
Yeah.
And
And
a dishwasher
process.
only uses 6?
You're too new to change.
I thought a dishwasher used a lot of water,
Not
too.
anymore.
No?
Well, mine's an old dishwasher.
Yeah, mine also not that.
And is
But I only
the
use
toilet
dishwasher
number
once a
the
week.
current,
The low flow, low
current
flush.
style toilets that are being sold, or is that the traditional old ones? Do you know?
Oh, yeah.
That's- well, it's
I
3
don't know
gallons.
that.
I think the low flow, aren't they 1.6 or
Yeah.
something?
Something like that, yeah, that's what I
So
was.
that's an old one.
Well, and the dual flush, you can even use
Even
less,
less.
Yeah,
so.
This is just an example
Well,
how
how many
someone
times
might
people
use
just leave the
150 gallons.
faucet
So
running while they're doing something else. Yeah, just little things like that.
That's pretty interesting.
Is that the end?
Cool.
One
Mike.
more. So I did mention these
Oh, yeah.
affordability metrics. So I wanted to show both the water and our wastewater bills and how they may impact customers in terms of medium household income and maybe a minimum wage comparison. So if you look at the table on the left, now I've taken the information, the very low, 50% of the area median income, I've taken that off of the paper, the white paper that Alden had put together.
Housing, yeah.
So those numbers come from. So that's the annual expense for that average customer, low-income customer, so somebody that's using that 6 units. So the total is about 1.69% for a family of 4 on the very low, and on the extremely low, it's about 2.5, 2.6%. Now, the median household income measure, there's a lot of different, there's a lot of literature out there in terms of what's the right range to use. I've seen them from 1.5 all the way up to 4% in terms of what that range should be. I just wanted to show that as a measure there. And then the table on the right is a minimum wage comparison. So somebody making $12.50 an hour, what does it cost them? how many hours do they have to work to pay their water and sewer bill?
Oh, so that's hours?
That's hours,
That's
yeah.
in hours, okay.
Any questions?
Are you comfortable? I just want a general nod that you're comfortable with where we're at. Perfect. Then we will work on getting something into a formal meeting.
Yeah, I think the wastewater is great. Great move. Thank you for that.
Before we move on, I just wanted to thank Peter. This has been a
Yeah.
huge education experience
Yeah.
for all of us. And I feel like he's done it with an incredible amount of grace. I've appreciated how much time he spent with Bonnie and with others of us to help us all get here and understand what we're doing. So thank
Yeah.
you.
Absolutely. I said to Ann the other day that your superpower is explaining things. But I think
Well, I
that's
don't know.
actually, that's actually discredit to you because that implies that it's a natural gift that you have, and that may be true, but that fails to represent that you put in a lot of effort and that you have developed this as a skill. So I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
And living up to the bragging I'm always doing about the staff. They're extraordinary, go way above and beyond, and are moving the city dramatically in really good directions.
Great fortune.
Yep, we are. Thank you. This is really good.
Thanks.
For this. Appreciate it. Means a lot. All right.
So we now have one item, and this was a late add to the council meeting, and Kelly can come up. We are actually only going to be talking about 205, because all other issues have been addressed at this point, but I wanted to give her a chance to speak to that.
So I want to lead off with a little bit of an apology. Next time, what I'd like to do when we head into a session is bring you the whole C4 agenda at one time. You all talk about it at the C4 meeting. You have a set of topics included in the C4 agenda. And the way it's played out, I think I brought them in a little bit of a piecemeal fashion. So we'll do that differently next time. But the request that we have right now is related to 205. So far this session, we haven't sent any letters in support of 205 as a council or talked about it. The request right now is to, it's Milwaukee's logo and Tigard's logo, I believe, are the two logos that are not currently on a slide, that the mayor of West Lynn is going to show to the Joint Committee on Transportation tomorrow, requesting funding for I-205. So that request is linked to House Bill 3209. What that bill does is it allows the state to issue $460 million in bonds to construct that project. It's all funded out of the transportation fund, so it specifically states in the bill that there's no general fund resources in there. It's really basically just the legislature authorizing the state to bond for that project. So the question tonight is, I know you C4 members have talked about the project before. We've had some email discussion about the project in 2018. And what was that? And really just tonight, really the only ask is, does the council want to have the city's logo on the slide tomorrow? Or not? That's it.
Didn't Mayor Axelrod come, he was scheduled to come to us, did he come to us, and didn't we talk about that?
No, we can't. He
We
talked
talked about
to us
Willamette.
about the locks,
Yeah.
Oh, the locks, not the,
which we,
okay.
And I talked, and I apologize, I didn't really describe what that, does anyone need me to talk about the elements of the project, or does everybody know what the?
yes, because I was
Okay.
under the impression that $460 million would not build the full length of that project, including the bridge.
So I'll tell you what the full length of the project is. So it's 7 miles. It rebuilds the Abernathy Bridge, which currently necks down, and then there's the segment that goes between the Abernathy Bridge to, I believe, the Stafford exit is 2 miles in each direction. So regional transportation policy says, okay, each freeway in the region can be three lanes in each direction. So it kind of, it gets it to three lanes in each direction for that 7-mile segment. I am not as intimately aware of the latest and greatest cost estimates to know exactly how much $460 million gets you, or how much of the funding has already been secured through other ways. So I don't know, I can't tell you how much of the entire length of the corridor is constructed with $460 million. It's more than what I've always understood to be needed just to do the Abernathy Bridge section.
Right.
So-
My understanding, and then this is pulling from old memory,
Yeah.
but I was thinking the total project of both the bridge and the widening all the way to Stafford was in the 1.5 or 1.2 billion range. But
But
it could be completely.
Isn't there
misremembered.
some money that's already allocated for the engineering of
Yes.
so, I mean, you have to deduct that
Yeah,
from
but
the
that was
total
like 50
cost.
million or
Well,
something.
so this message from Tim Knapp that kind of put out the call says that the 460 million is to advance the widening and seismic improvement project. It does not claim that it's going to build the whole thing.
Okay, so
So-
it's just doing
Well, it doesn't,
Abernathy.
It doesn't say.
It
No,
should be
it says
more than
both.
Abernathy.
Yeah.
That's more than Abernathy. I mean, that's more than the cost of replacing Abernathy the last time I checked on it. Unless it's drastically gone up, that's a little more than that. It might get you all the way up to, I don't know if it's exit 10. There's that gets you the auxiliary lane up the hill, which is a major operational challenge. So it might do the bridge and that section. I really don't know, though. All I know, and all I can control today, is to say that the bill they're asking you all to support, by providing the logo, is $460 million, which constructs
Some
a
piece.
fairly sizable portion of this project. And I don't have a ton, I mean, I can go Google for you, get some more information on what that would be. But I think for now, they're just looking for support
Right.
to get out of the committee. Because the bill, as you know, the deadlines for getting bills out of committee are clipping along. So I think this is their push in the House committee to see if they can get it out. And they're asking for their Clackamas County city logos.
so those of you on C4, I mean, I'd like to know your thoughts. I guess, a couple years ago, we forewent something for West Lynn's benefit, with the idea that they would then help us with Monroe or Railroad down the line, and,
And Monroe
is
now
that
on the
taking
arch-
shape,
That's
and do
still-
we still think that will happen, and,
It's a
sort of
different-
It's on the,
how much should we?
Completely different, this is a completely different
Yeah.
pot of money.
I realize that,
yeah.
I realize that.
And Monroe is on the list
Yeah.
for the. and
It's
this
being
is
supported.
RTP, right?
Right,
Yeah.
yes, and it is
It's
being
high.
supported every time
It
the
is.
conversation comes up.
Yeah.
Somebody at the table reminds everybody that Milwaukee stepped back, so we
Yeah.
gotta
Yeah,
make sure
okay.
that Monroe is the next.
And actually 99 McLaughlin is also ranking pretty high on that list as well.
Well, that's
which
on the
hasn't been
T20 list, which is
That's on the-
completely
yeah.
on a different list, but
ball of wax.
Yeah.
so many
Right.
lists.
There are a
Well,
little
and so
bit.
this is another
So many
different
balls
pot
of
of
wax.
money that if it doesn't come here and help relieve congestion in that bottleneck, I mean, this is one of the worst congested, highway portions probably in the state, I don't know.
So here is where I have stood, just so you all know why we are one of two cities not currently on that letter. Fixing the bottleneck will only move where that congestion occurs. It won't stop the congestion. It's, there's a thing that happens, and LA and Denver and Atlanta and virtually every other major metropolitan area will walk.
Every other
Yeah.
major metropolitan area.
Will walk you through how they added a lane, 10 miles of lane, and for 6 months, the congestion was reduced, and then back to the same
And I've
congestion.
raised that concern in a conversation with Kelly, and she had a pretty good answer.
So let me
Not to put
finish
you on the
before,
It's okay, I'll listen. Yeah.
it's called what, induced response? isn't it?
Induced demand.
And induced demand. That's what they've named that phenomena. It's such a phenomena, it's been named. So it seems logical when just regular people are sitting around going, gee, if we just fix that one bottleneck where everybody has to slow down, everybody won't have to slow down. It'll be awesome, but it doesn't work that way. I was willing to make a compromise and add our name to that letter if they were willing to guarantee that that system, all of that construction would be designed for bus on shoulder, so that that actually does reduce congestion. When you can add mass transit into the same system, that is a thing that actually reduces congestion. And nobody was willing to guarantee that. Not ODOT, not Clackamas County. They weren't willing to put even a sentence in that said, we're asking for this. So I said, okay, you're not solving the problem. I am not signing on to not solving the problem, spending a whole bunch of money and not solving the problem. It's not like it's magic money that comes from some magic place that then doesn't have any effect on anything else that's happening anywhere else. It is tax dollars that will pay for that could be used in other ways. Could be used to build a mass transit system, could be used to increase the number of buses, could be used for 100 other things, or could just not increase the taxes. So, but adding those lanes in the experience of every city in this country will not reduce congestion for long. 6 months, 9 months, and then it's back. So.
And this is playing out very publicly for the exact same, we're just not getting as much conversation out here in Clackamas County. But this has been a big conversation, big controversial, and they're doing the exact same thing up in Portland. And all of the same arguments, for and against apply here. And at least in Portland, they're getting some additional alternative transportation elements included in that project. This one includes nothing at all.
Probably because TriMet's not at the table either.
Well, it's because the county's asking for it, and that's, to me, this is not in line with where we are heading as a city. Now, whether the rest of the county is with us that's, I don't know that we need to affix our name to goals and policies that aren't in line with ours. It's gonna happen with or without us.
True, and it has been a C4 discussion item, and every time we have a retreat, that's one of the things that comes up, and everybody says, most people say,
No, I know that
yeah,
that they want to add
this is
lanes.
right.
I know that that's a big
I don't know
topic
if you
of
guys
conversation.
remember
But they're not-
205 before they added the lanes, the 3 lanes, where it was only 2 lanes before, so from Stafford to Highway 5, when they added the 3rd lane. It was back when Darlene Hooley was in Congress. It was federal money. It came from there. It started off as they were going to be just temporary lanes while construction, or not construction, but while work went on or something, and they ultimately were made into permanent lanes instead of just temporary lanes, and it made a huge difference in how traffic moved through there, and especially freight. You look at what's backed up on 205 now, and it's freight along with all those cars. But if you could just move goods, not just people, but move goods, personally, I think it's a benefit to be able to do that.
Which is why the big criticism, that I'm hearing against mostly the widening project in Portland, is that there was no consideration for congestion pricing only. There was no study
Right.
about
Oh,
what
right.
could we do to actually reduce congestion if we
Right.
only did congestion pricing.
Which is the one thing that consistently bears out, that
Yes.
it
Right.
does make a difference on congestion
Right.
over
Instead,
time.
It's
Yeah.
always been focused on
Add more
adding
lanes.
lanes. And
But they'll
then
still, they'll
maybe
still
then-
ultimately do congestion pricing even with added lanes or without added lanes. Or
Right,
they'll
but
add
what if
something
we
to
can
be able to
save
do that.
ourselves $1 billion by looking first at congestion pricing and then adding lanes?
If it's still needed,
Right,
which,
so we're
And is
doing
this,
the opposite.
is this proposal, is tolling Abernathy still? That was
believe it's-
part
so
of
they're
it.
two
It's not
different-
part of this
it's
deal.
with the Fed, if.
So they're two different
two
processes.
different-
They were all included in the same bill that funded the design of 205 and funded Rose Quarter. And it also funded and required the state to apply for congestion pricing or do a congestion pricing study and look at different ways that they could do that in the region. It all kind of happened at the same time. There were also a bunch of delivery timelines included in the requirements for spending the money, which would have made it pretty difficult to do an environmental impact or an EA on 205 and Rose Quarter and do the congestion pricing at the same time. So they all kind of had to launch, and they all couldn't assume each other. So there's just some complexities to that. But yes, it has, I believe, wrapped up its work, and they have, I don't know if they've applied yet to the feds,
Yes.
if they've actually
I was
turned
told
it
that
in.
they had
Isn't it
applied.
back in
And,
DC?
and Abernathy's still in the mix on that, last time I paid attention to it. I believe it's actually still one of, and the I-5, the downtown portion are in there. I can confirm that for you, though. It's one of the benefits of my new job is I don't know every answer to this question, like I used to. But yeah, those were all in a scenario to look at congestion pricing. And absolutely, you have to insert another tool into this conversation if you're actually going to manage the capacity that's there. I would say that there is a difference between straight up adding capacity, which would fall very much into the induced demand category, and some of the operational fixes. It's kind of like, when you pull the stick out of the creek and more water flows through, there are just some places where there's a stick in the creek and it's blocking. Or, you're dropping in the Rose Quarter is actually a great example. You're dropping lanes with almost no space for anyone to merge. And so you just have a ton of crashes that gum up the system. There's not even a place for anybody to pull over if they do get in a crash. So there are places where you really can, where I think the bottleneck term really applies. I think the bigger question for tonight, though, is, I think for your purposes, I think Councilor Falconer made a good point, like, we are a little bit removed from this. We're in the county, but from my point of view, it's less about transportation and a little bit more about cities in the county. And if you want to say yes or no to this one, either way, I am not here to advocate for either outcome, I promise. I'm just here to ask you I know there's been a lot of conversations. I believe they didn't put the wording in the letter that you wanted related to transit. I know that's been a sticking point. I do know they put some other verbiage in at some point that talked about making sure the shoulders are of a sufficient width to accommodate it. But I think one of the larger issues is there's no existing high-capacity transit plan that tells you what that would be. So it's sort of like build it to hold the thing we're not sure is going to go over it. But it is a lot of money. It's a lot of money. You can't currently spend highway trust fund dollars on transit. That's not an allowable use for this type of money.
Bus and rapid bus, it
You
can be
can't-
used on a lane that can accommodate a
Yeah.
rapid bus line.
And I think
So
that
it can't be
Yeah.
used for a light rail system, I understand that, but
You
you can
can-
drive a bus on a highway
you
lane,
can
on a dedicated
use,
highway lane.
and I think they may be walking that line with you, which is why it's part of the confusion.
Sure.
But I know there have been discussions about making it wide enough.
That they can do that.
But saying I'm making it wide enough and then confirming exactly what that space will be used for, maybe that's where the sticking point was. I don't know. I'd have to go back
Well,
and
and if they
ask.
were leaving it in the
But-
congestion pricing, which they're doing, then it would seem that they'd have to be
Yeah.
able to do that anyhow, because they're not gonna use congestion
It's-
pricing on a two-lane road.
There's so many layers of complexity.
And this question is
Yeah.
really not that important.
Yeah, and if you
for-
want,
For tonight.
No,
I
it's
think the
okay.
broader
I don't-
conversation's important.
yes, either way.
But no one's gonna be sad. It was a city manager who reached out to me.
Yeah.
It wasn't even the mayor.
It's not me, I am not making you talk about this, I
The
promise.
mayor
then let's
reached
not
out
do
to us via
I'm
email.
fine not doing it, but we can't make that decision
Yeah.
for you, and so
Yeah.
this is, there's not a lot of fallout from this decision if you
I
don't
don't
wanna do it.
necessarily want to be endorsing this.
Perfect.
So that's
Okay.
my personal
Okay.
view on this because I don't like that.
Yeah. Right.
But
I
that's,
understand.
and if it's not gonna hurt anybody's feelings, then can we just quietly?
Well,
leave
yeah,
our
if people
logo
haven't
off?
been lobbying you, Mark,
Oh, they may have. I'm so far behind on
He's
my
not seen
email
his
right
email.
now. I could have 100 burning emails.
You can
From
use
the
that as your
mayors.
excuse.
Councilman Parks has been getting lobbied, I would say. You've gotten some requests and got a request. That's how this kind of triangulated into tonight's conversation.
But it's late in the session.
Yeah.
We already chose not to act once, but we needed to, and when I say we, Kelly and I didn't have
We
enough time.
supported last year.
We did, but Kelly and I didn't have enough time to get something before you as the letter was proceeding, and so we dropped it because we couldn't hit the schedule of the council in order to make it work. This was our second go at it. You guys, I think in general, I'm hearing a 3-2-ish, not that it would vote, because you would never vote during a study session, but in general, I'm hearing that you're probably less excited about proceeding tonight.
Well, I'm supportive of
I
the
know.
widening of 205, so I wouldn't.
I was counting-ish that. Counselor Beatty,
I'm totally, I have
agnostic.
no strong feeling on this at all, either way.
So I don't think we have enough of a reason to
I
throw
don't
anything
think-
forward.
yeah.
Perfect.
But I will bring back C4, the slate, next time, all together. And we'll talk about it ideally before it's done, so that we just do it once, if that's okay, because I'm
I
sorry.
thought you had other things you sent us. This is the only one? I mean,
Yeah,
you
no, I
us
just
a-
sent you a ton of emails
Yeah.
about everything. Jason
were
and I
just
sent you the same
spewing
email.
out the
I sent
emails.
you another one. I was just
We
sending
feel, we
it.
feel very well communicated.
Nothing, but nothing else.
Any of her spam that came
Yeah,
in, she just sent it to
yeah.
you?
I'm just going. You've got like a folder just for me now, where everything I send goes into like the trash.
But
Yeah,
nothing
no.
else that needed discussion tonight?
I don't legislatively know. The only other thing was going to be Happy Valley, but it's dead.
Yeah, well, and I was just gonna do the 30-second update on HB 2007, which was the diesel bill. I know that you had raised some questions about why the scope had been narrowed, and that was really just that there's no way this is gonna pass if we don't narrow the scope to the metro area.
Yeah.
It's still live, it's still got legs, it's still being negotiated. They expect it to be moving to rules this week, and I was going to update our testimony in support of the bill and just send that all out to you by email, or if you don't care and you just want me to run with it, I can do that too. But I do want to get something out Thursday.
You can do it under your signatures.
No, I would like it to be from representing council. Since it's just an update of the position that we've had
Right.
previously, I feel like that's probably
Right, as
something
long
I
as
can
it's
do.
Yeah, you're fine
Yeah.
doing it.
Well, I guess people saw that the negotiation to get the school bill passed means they dropped firearms and they dropped vaccinations.
Right,
Yeah.
I did see that.
Yeah.
which I found to be fascinating choices.
Well, I think there were ones they didn't know that they could pass anyway, so
Yeah,
that's why they
the
dropped.
vax one, they were,
The only
Well,
other thing
and
I
also
did,
Possibly ones that can come short.
I did send you all that I am looking for names to pass along to Metro. So I gave you the two I was thinking of.
I sent you
Mark
that.
gave me
I
one,
sent
you
you
gave me
some.
one, you gave me one. So I've got a few to work with, and I can send out a recap email just to say, here's what I heard from everyone, and kind of go from there to feel them, because then I got to check in and just see if they have capacity, and then send those on. So
And, sorry, the timeline again, 3 months, June, July, August, so summer months?
yeah, it's intense.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna be real honest with people about that, because I don't want to catch them off guard. This process that Metro's doing, it's ambitious, and it's great. I mean, I'm glad they're being ambitious, but these local investment teams have a lot of work to do in a very concentrated period of time. So thank you you guys for giving me the names that you have, and I'll just handle that by email if that's okay, unless y'all want to talk about it more.
Yeah, and you mentioned a couple names that I thought were great. I wasn't offering as alternatives.
Yeah.
I hope
Yeah.
that we're all adding, or these are supplements, we're not.
Yeah.
Yeah, I may have one or two.
I think I'm gonna get no's, and I also just like having a roster of people that that are active and interested in transportation work, because there'll be other
Well, and the PSAC is obviously a place to go for that, too.
Absolutely, yeah, we've got vacancies, so that's another great reason just to, so, that was the only other thing I had emailed about, I think.
So, is there some, I mean, other than just the letter that you sent us, is there, I mean, if, should we be, is there something that will be that we'll be able to forward to people as we're thinking about it? I mean, is there like more of a formal process other than we're just gonna be putting some names forward and then they'll be selected?
It feels pretty informal. I'm almost surprised I got that Word document, because what I heard at the staff, kind of the technical advisory committee was, consider this your ask.
Okay.
We need we need these committees and we need names and we're forming them now. I think the county is attempting to, kind of concentrate our ask, because they gave me they put forward a couple names too. But no, I think they need the committee like yesterday.
Yeah, they
So I
can't be
doubt there'll
picky.
be much, and that's why I'm hoping to just get them something,
Yeah.
Okay.
soon.
How many
Otherwise,
places
we'll miss
do
the
we
boat.
get on that?
There's no defined set that anyone,
So if you send in 3 or 4 names, they might all be selected?
maybe, yeah. Yeah, I
Be
mean,
good to have good representation
yeah,
for a
I think
change on
Lake Huron
something like that.
Metro is, if you look at where they're like, I mean, they would love some geographic representation, but their MoCo focused on kind of, diversity and just different points of view. So if they happen to get, however they structure that is, I think, more important to them, based on that Word document I forwarded y'all. So yeah, that's it. But I don't know who will get put forward, but I'll have some rapid fire conversations with folks tomorrow, see how willing the people are that we've talked about so far, and then pass along the names. Ideally, I'll do it tomorrow, to be honest, because it's just moving so fast. I'm afraid if I don't, I'll miss the window.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Anything else? Okay, then we're adjourned.
Thank you, sir.
Hey, Mark, would Yelena be a totally weird choice?
Who?